Welcome to DAX Machina. Join us as we explore the mysteries of this world. Cryptids, monsters, macabre tales, and horror stories abound. Could they be true? Are monsters real?
Good evening, folks, and thank you guys for joining us for another edition of DAX Machina Wednesday evening edition. And it's just me and Robbie tonight. So guys will bear with us because we're both just a couple of hillbillies and we get a little confused once in a while. Robbie, how you doing, brother? Yeah, most of the time.
Tired but doing good.
I hear you, brother. I've been dealing with some lingering back issues this week. They said after the procedure it would take 2 to 6 weeks for it to go into full effect. Well, this is just into the second week and I'm feeling it. So keep my fingers crossed.
It got cold and windy last night, that game. I had another game last night and it got cold and windy and I'm still feeling it and hurting today. So that's what happens when you get old.
Yeah, I am right there with you. Folks, we usually do this at some point in the program, but I'm going to go ahead and jump in right here. If y'all are the praying type, or I'm not asking for who you pray to. It's your dealer's choice, as they say. But keep Tammy Lamb and our own William Nighthawk in your prayers. They're both going through some major health issues, and we want to just remember them and keep them in our thoughts and prayers because they're dealing with a lot, and they are part of the DAX Machina family, and we appreciate both of them so much, and we want you guys to just keep them in your thoughts and prayers, as well as Pat Murphy, who's in the chat as well. She's been dealing with some pretty serious health issues as well. So thank you guys for that, and much appreciated. And tonight we are going to be digging in to a very infamous Bigfoot attack that happened in 1829. Robbie and I were just talking about it before we go on the air, and this one's a good one. Robbie, what do you think?
Whew. As Bigfoot sightings, stories, attacks, whatever you want to call it, this is probably one of the, other than the Moss Mountain when we talked about, this is probably one of the most gruesome and scary ones that I've ever heard.
It's also one of the earliest ones we know that are recorded. Yeah. And this one wasn't just some campfire tale that got spread around. This one made national news. It made newspapers across the country. So I think that not only gives credence to it, but when we look at what happens in this story, and you compare that to modern Bigfoot sightings and other things that we have since learned about behavior of Bigfoot and Bigfoot type creatures, there is so much in this that is just absolutely spot on that have been verified in other accounts. So to me, I firmly believe this happened. I can't speak for Robbie, but to me this one just rings true.
Oh yeah. Well, when you were telling me about it, I was just like, it's like I said, it's definitely a visceral, real, in your face type. It's not like the Harry and the Henderson type feel good. Oh, we saw the pretty creature. Nah, this is nothing like that.
This is not a peaceful bonding. Yeah, everybody had a good time with Bigfoot. This is one of the more brutal stories I've come across. Christy Crawford says, I don't know this one. Can you tell it beginning to end, please? Yes, ma'am. That is what we're planning to do. Going back to the 1700s in that area, the creek and not Osceola. Osceola was one of the name.
Okeechobee.
I'm looking for the name of the tribe.
Oh, Osceola. No, that's the name of the guy. We're both, see, what we tell you, we get confused all the time.
Yeah, confuse us hillbillies pretty easy. Seminole.
Yes.
The creek and the Seminole had legends about this area dating back to long before, any of our European ancestors made it to this continent, it was already considered a place to avoid, a place of mystic proportions, where you would go into the swamp and sometimes you didn't come back, and sometimes people would go out there and get lost for no reason. And they had accounts where they would encounter different types of creatures out there, that so all the tribes in the area avoided this spot. Now, during this time, they were starting to settle the area. Florida was a very popular place for people to live because the temperature's mild. You can grow food pretty much year round. So it's, as far as settlements go, it's a great, almost idyllic place to build a lasting settlement, where you can grow and support your food and keep your people fed year round. Not to mention plentiful game. But people have always stayed clear of these swamps, especially the Okeechobee. This is a very deep swamp. They're thick, deep, dark bayous. You've got alligators. You've got all kinds of these creatures out there that not only are dangerous, but then you could walk into a puddle of quicksand, or take a wrong turn and get turned around and maybe not find your way back out of there again. Of course, this is back in the days before they had airboats or anything like that. So going back in there on foot or even on canoes was a dangerous business. And of course, you didn't have GPS, or most of them didn't have compasses back then. So, going in there, you had to rely on navigation skills. And I guess this was such a dense swamp, it was very, very easy to get turned around in. But in 1829, one of the worst droughts on record hit that area, and the water receded. So a gentleman and his friend and one of their sons, all it says is the boy was a young boy. They decided that they were going to go back into this swamp and explore. Hang on a second. The winter of 1828 and 29 was extremely dry, and two men living on the edges of the swamp decided to explore it as deep as they could go. They were accompanied by a young boy, which I believe was one of the men's sons, and they went to the Okefenokee, and over the course of 2 weeks continued to keep going deeper and deeper into it, marking their trail as they went. Once they started getting into the heart of the swamp, they made a really weird discovery. They started finding huge footprints. It says the length of, and this is a direct quote, I'm reading this directly. The length of the foot was 18 and the breadth 9 inches. The monster, from every appearance, must have moved forward in an easy or hesitating gait, his stride from heel to toe being a trifle over 6 feet. And that was reported in the Georgia Statesman, January 1829. It was also republished in the Connecticut Sentinel in February of 1829. A 6-foot stride, that is a big boy. He said just a trifle over 6 feet. Robbie, you're a tracker. Let's discuss that a little bit before I go too much farther. What kind of creature, what kind of known creature could explain a 6-foot stride if we're not talking Bigfoot?
Nothing. An average human male's stride length is 32 inches, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just an average walk, gait, however you want to describe it. So that's what, just a little over 3 feet.
32 inches, just shy of 3 feet.
Yeah. So you're doubling that.
Mm-hmm.
So
more than
if a 6-foot guy is doing, let's just say 3 feet to make it even, then you're doing something that's a little over 6 foot, probably double the size. So you're looking at least 12 foot. Yeah, if you're ballparking it. So
for all those folks out there, and I know, we don't really have many of them in our crowd, but there are people out there that claim that people go out with wooden footprints that strap on their boots to fake these tracks. How big would a guy have to be to make that kind of stride?
About 12 feet.
Yeah.
So you're looking at somebody,
Not
somebody
to mention the depth of the impressions.
Yeah. You're looking at somebody who makes Yao Ming look like a toddler.
So, in your opinion, as a tracker, it would be physically impossible for a person to recreate those tracks with that stride.
Especially in that time, yeah.
And on the odd chance that a couple of guys exploring the swamp would come across them.
Yeah, I think somebody's gonna come this way, so let's put them right here. I mean, who? Number one, you would have to know that people were going to come into that area, which, like you said earlier, that it was already kind of a known fact. Hey, don't go into this swamp.
Right.
So you got that where most people are not going to go in there anyway. So if you were going to fake it, why would you put it somewhere where you knew a lot of people were not going to go? Because if you want to hoax something like that, you want to put it where somebody's going to see it.
Right.
So that kind of throws that out the window right there. We're going to go put it where not too many people are going to go. So then you got to put it right where somebody's going to see it. Number two, which is going to be, how do you, especially back then. Now, I mean, nowadays where all these trails are there. Okay. Yeah, maybe. But back then there were no trails that people walk down all the time like they do nowadays. Just walking trails that people just got out and walked for,
right.
They bushwhacked.
This was deep swamp that was previously inaccessible because of the
and you
water.
said they marked their trail, so I'm assuming they were trailblazing. So if they were trailblazing and marking their trail, they weren't on a known walked path,
right,
that people normally walk on. So that throws that out the window.
Yeah, they were exploring an area of the swamp that they had never had access to before. Yeah. Because of that drought. It was an extreme drought happened over the winter of 1828 to 1829. Uncle John's in the house. Hey, Uncle John.
Hey, Uncle John. So you just taking those things right there into account. Why would you even do it with just those things? Then you got to come up with how you're going to do it, and how. No way one person can do that unless you got somebody who's an Olympic caliber athlete at that time that could do a one-legged 6-foot broad jump
and repeat it.
Yeah, and constantly repeat it on both legs.
Because it said they found a track way, not a track way.
Yeah. So, yeah, in my opinion, no, I don't see any way that somebody, it would take 15 or 20 people to pull something like that off. Because it'd take that many people just to hold it down and put the weight down to push it down as far as they were talking about it being in. And then that many people to pick him up and take him to the next track and do the same thing. So you're talking
they were talking about these tracks being like a couple inches deep.
Yeah. So I don't see it.
Yeah. I don't see it being faked. Plus, there's the fact that nobody really knew they were going out there.
Yeah, all of a sudden it dries up and they say, okay, we're going to go see if we can find something.
Right.
I'm sure if they I'm sure they told people we're going, but it's probably not, hey, we're going next month. It's probably, hey, we're going tomorrow.
Well, not, this is the spot where we're going. They were just going into the swamp to see how far they could go.
So the chances of somebody getting all this information, getting all this stuff, getting it set up, and even being able to accomplish that.
And this was 1829. It's not like hoaxing was a big thing in the media. Yeah. This would have just been, if that had been set up, it would have been literally somebody going to all that lengths to pull a prank on two guys and a kid.
Yeah, and that was not something that was done a lot back then, like you just said. Hoaxing was not a big thing.
And they were 2 weeks into the swamp. So somebody would have had to beat them out there 2 weeks away from home just on the off chance they found these tracks. So, yeah, I 100% believe they stumbled across a real trackway.
Chances are slim and none, and Slim's just left town?
I would say so. Well, to get back to a little more of the details, these guys, when they found these tracks, they decided right then and there, they're like, you know what? We've seen enough. It's time to take our crap and go home. And I don't blame them. I mean, I didn't have a clue what that was. And I was just out there, especially considering that 1829, those were the days of flintlock rifles. It's not like they had the ability to carry like an M4 or or a 458 SOCOM like we talk about going out with. This is a single shot flintlock, which took time to reload. So these guys were like baby deuces, and we are out of here. And I don't blame them. Again, so when they get back, when they made it back, it took them another 2 weeks to get home. They, of course, told this story to their friends and neighbors about finding these giant tracks. So word gets around, and a group of hunters from Florida, and this happened right near the Florida-Georgia line. So a group of hunters from Florida came to see them. There were 9 of them in total, and they said, "We want you to take us to where those tracks are because we want to track it and find out what it is." It took them some doing, but they finally talked one of the guys into going back. So he takes them back, and they finally find remnants of these the first tracks that they discovered. Some of the tracks were still visible, but it was mostly trace tracks at this point. But they found the spot where they found the original tracks, and they stopped there and decided they were going to stop for the night because it was getting late in the day. And back then, and Robbie can back me up on this. I don't know if you guys know a whole lot about black powder. Black powder tends to get damp. And this being a very wet environment, they decided to discharge their rounds for the night and load fresh powder. So they would have fresh rounds in the chamber to defend themselves that night. So all of them discharged their rifles and reload. And when they discharged their weapons, they heard something growl in the woods start coming toward them. So now they're reloading just as fast as they can reload. Well, this thing bursts out. It is this gigantic hairy creature bursts out of the swamp and charges them. So these guys circle up back to back, and as this thing is charging them, 7 rifles ring out and put bullets in this thing, and it keeps coming. It gets into the midst of these guys. And this is where the story gets wild. It gets into the midst of these experienced hunters and starts grabbing people and pulling their heads off. This is something we've heard about from the Nahanni Valley, with something we've heard about from the valley down in southern Arizona. This is details Moss Mountain, where they were tearing heads off there. This thing wades into the camp and starts tearing heads off of people. It kills 7 of them before they finally get it dropped. And as this thing is dying, it's roaring. It was still calling out. And they were pretty afraid it was calling out for more of its own kind. But I'm going to read this actually excerpt from what these guys said. It says and this is talking about from the moment it had arrived out of the woods. It says, the next minute he was in full view, advancing upon us with a terrible look and a ferocious mien. Our little band instinctively gathered close in a body and presented our rifles. The huge being, nothing daunted, bounded upon his victims, and in the same instant received the contents of 7 rifles. He did not fall alone, nor until he had glutted his wrath and dealt death of 5 of them, which he effected by wringing the head from the body. Writhing and exhausted at length, he fell, with his hapless prey beneath his grasp. As the creature lay dying on the ground, writhing and sometimes roaring, the men who survived the attack gathered around it to make a closer inspection. The creature was found to measure 13 feet from head to toe, and its breadth and volume of just proportions, meaning, its proportions matched a creature of 13 feet tall. They were scared to death that this thing had called in more. Was calling in more of its kind, and they fled. The bodies of the ones that were killed were never recovered. And when they finally came out of the swamp, told their story, nobody wanted to go back in and try to find that thing's body or to find the men who had fallen. And that's pretty much the entire story, but we're going to talk about a lot of the details on that.
Melissa had asked earlier why you was reading if footprints were the only evidence found. I believe that was because they didn't go back and try to find anything else. So,
right, they didn't go back in and get the body.
Yeah, the original trackway and then the remnants of that original trackway the second time around were the only things that they evidence-wise that they found.
Right, and this was back before anybody knew to cast tracks They didn't think of bringing the creature. Well, obviously, with the little amount of survivors, they weren't carrying the creature out. They didn't even bring their own dead out. So, as far as physical evidence, there's really none. Well, when you start looking at the details of this account, it lines up with what happened in so many other accounts down through the centuries, and down through the years, not centuries. But also, this happened at such a time where it wasn't like they could post it on the internet and somebody in another part of the country would have similar details. I mean, when was that the Moss Mountain attack happened? I can't remember what year.
I want to say it was sometime in the 1800s, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in the early 1800s. I can't remember exactly when. Why am I not finding it?
Let's see.
I know I had that. This is going to drive me crazy. Why is it not showing up? I mean, when we did the show on it, I found lots of stuff.
Let's see if I can. Halloween night, 1819.
1819. So this was actually the Moss Mountain attack was actually preceded the one in Florida by 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's highly unlikely there was any communication that let them know the other one happened. That 1819.
No.
Thank you, Meg. But the similarities of those things on Moss Mountain coming in and tearing arms and legs off and ripping heads off, the similarities to the attack are very similar. I mean, they're very telling.
Oh,
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah, when you were we were first talking about it, backstage, when you were telling me that was what was going through my head was Naoma telling us about that. I was like, that sounds almost identical to what happened there.
Very similar attack. Pat Murphy says she's having her colon removed on Monday, March 13th. Well, we'll be praying for you, Pat. We hope everything turns out all right. Thank you very much. Yeah, the similarities between the two attacks are really pretty terrifying. Only I think there were more people killed in the Moss Mountain attack. But
yeah, I think so.
But considering the savagery with this attack, and this was one creature, Moss Mountain said he saw multiple of the creatures coming into their camp.
Yeah.
But this was one creature that took multiple hits from flintlock rifles before finally dying. Wading into the crowd of because the hunters were back to back, forming a defensive circle, and this thing just waded into it. And those flintlocks weren't exactly, they weren't exactly, weak rifles. Some of them were shooting 50, 52, even, well, in the case of the Hawken rifle, the Hawken shot a 68 caliber projectile. Well, they had multiple versions of the Hawken, but one as big as 68. I don't know the sizes. I'm not real familiar with flintlock rifles, but I do know some of the calibers got pretty big.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, just go to any museum and look at those musket balls and look at it. They weren't BB size. They weren't size of, double-aught buck pellets. I mean, those things were like marbles, which I think marbles are like, what, 68 millimeters, which is like a 60 caliber.
Something like that.
I mean, you imagine a lead ball that big hitting you, I mean, and to walk through something like that.
Oh, yeah. To just keep coming. I just Googled it. It says brief history of flintlock hunting in America. Most of the hunting calibers were 30 and 45 caliber. Well, 45 caliber is still nothing to sneeze at. That's a big bullet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to say Kentucky Ballistics. I think he did a show on some black powder rifles and what those, and they're devastating.
Well, the one I use in the new book, the Hawken rifles were known to take, charging cavalrymen, literally out of the seat, just up and out of the seat of the saddle.
That was the precursor basically to the Sharps buffalo rifle, wasn't it? That's what they used to hunt buffalo right on the plains.
I believe so. The advantage that the Sharps had over the Hawken was that rolling block where they could lever rounds in a lot faster. The Sharps, not the Sharps, the Hawken was a single shot muzzle loader. Dogs are barking.
Yeah. He's mad because he's in the cage and not in here.
That's funny. Every time I start to get something serious, he lets us know he's still in there.
Yeah.
Spoil rotten, just like my dog.
Yep. That's old Bucky.
Eric Testament says, my 54 caliber Springfield Hawkins kicked like a Missouri mule. That thing has range and knockdown power. Yeah, the Hawken was a fantastic rifle, and they were made here in St. Louis. I think one of the things I find the most interesting about this is, like I said, well, not just the similarities, but the brutality of the attack. That thing had to have some tremendous strength, not only to just grab people and twist their heads off, like taking the bottle cap off a ketchup bottle, but to take a full salvo, to wade through withering fire to do it. When it went, it didn't go alone. See that, Robbie?
He has to be the center of attention all the time, so
You might have to let him in there just so he'll calm down.
he's a goofball. Hold on, let me see if I can get him to hush.
Okay. Another great part about this story is that it's one of the earliest, and like Moss Mountain, it is one of the earliest known encounter stories that we have verified in print. It's not just something that was word of mouth campfire story. It's not something that just like the old quote unquote game of telephone when somebody told somebody and the story got a little bit bigger. And we've all heard campfire stories like that where somebody caught a 2-pound bass and then the next time the story it was 4 pounds and then so on and so on. This isn't like that. This was documented in newspapers and journals of the day. Both the one on Moss Mountain and the one here in the Okefenokee was the Okeechobee. But either way, that being documented, that is a very, very gruesome attack. So it's not like when these things made the paper back then. It's not like it was a big deal because wild man attacks and wolf man attacks and what they would refer to as a booger or even feral people. Those stories made the papers in the 1800s all the time, and nobody batted an eye. So what's the big deal now? Was it such a taboo subject?
People are just, they're not the same as they were back then. That's
true. Karen Polson said, did they give any other details other than height and build, like facial details? Everything I've said, I don't know everything I've read so far, there are no physical facial characteristics given. And they did just describe it as being 13 feet tall. I think it was an 18-inch track, 9 inches wide, pressed a couple inches into the hard pack. So this is a 13-foot tall creature that probably weighed north of 1,000 pounds, and was able to take multiple hits from heavy-duty rifles of the day and keep coming. Werewolf says, but we don't know is that all the shots hit it, that if all the shots hit it. If all those shots hit it, that's a little bit frightening even with modern technology. Dude, I'm right there with you. These were seasoned hunters and it was at close range. So I'm going to go out on a limb and guess most of them were probably hit. And the average barrel on those old flintlocks was like 30 to 36 inches. These rifles were very accurate. You've got a rifle barrel that long. The accuracy is pretty good, especially at close range. So I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that the bulk of the rounds hit this thing. So it was getting hit a lot. At least that's how it makes sense to me. Toshi the Wolf says, if you have something like that charging at you, you'd be hard pressed to keep a steady aim. True, but at close range, it's really hard to miss a target that big. Yeah, especially if it's one of those situations where you've got a rifle that long, because you're not going to get a whole lot of shift off. Like if you're using, like for example, my baby Glock has a barrel about like this. If I had my baby Glock up and it was just that much of a twist, that's going to make a huge difference in the range. But if you've got a really long barrel, even if you're floating it around, you're still going to be fairly close on center mass on something that big. Meg Mill says, Eric asked if it could be a gugway. Maybe. They didn't describe the facial features of it at all. So I would say it's definitely some type of Bigfoot, and it was certainly aggressive.
Yeah, I mean, when you first started reading it, obviously everybody that knows anything about it automatically starts thinking gugway because of all that stuff. But just the size of it kind of almost eliminates that, though, right? Because gugway are not usually that tall.
Well, gugway are big. Gugway tend to be pretty nasty, but gugway also tend to be more cold weather. Finding one in a swamp back then, because most of the early reports of gugway, in fact, we get the name gugway derived from cuckway, which was, I believe, an Athabascan word, meant face eater. These were cold climates. These were like north of the Canadian border. So the initial gugway stories we got came out of the Great Lakes area and in parts of Canada. So gugway tended to be more cold weather. But then again, they didn't describe this thing's face, so I don't want to say it's impossible. But I would lean more toward a really big Bigfoot or skunk ape.
Maybe a Genosqua?
Maybe. Well, Genosqua were also cold weather. But again, I'm not going to rule it out. A 13-footer is a big boy. I don't care what species it is.
Yeah.
Eric Testament says flintlock wasn't very accurate, better at close range. Well, this would have been at close range.
Yeah, very close. Too close.
Yeah, way closer than I would have wanted it to been. Gary Lowe says it was probably dead and just didn't know it. It kept going until it couldn't anymore. Yeah, and a lot can be said for when something's adrenaline gets going. So they were probably doing a lot of damage, but it still managed to kill most of them before it went. David Martin says, how fast could they load and fire? I don't know that I could give you exact specifics because I'm not super familiar with how flintlocks work. I know the basics of them are very much like black powder rifles, like a Hawken. Because I used to hunt black powder years ago, back when my early 20s. But even in my prime, when I was really well practiced, reloading a percussion cap black powder rifle would still probably take me better part of 30 seconds to a minute, depending on how prepared I was. You're lucky to get off one shot a minute.
Yeah, that's there. I mean, I would.
With the Wind says, I can tell you for a fact, based on personal sightings, gugway are in the swamp on the Gulf Coast. Well, that is definitely news. Good to know. Karen Polson says, "Do you feel the shots triggered the attack?" I think so. I think when they discharged their weapons, they drew it in.
Yep.
It was probably already territorial and may have even been aware of their presence, but discharging those weapons brought it in. So, right, wrong, or indifferent, I think they drew it in. But even once it was drawn in, it still had the opportunity to just try to scare them and head out. But it apparently came out of the woods and just came right at them. Reminds me of that South Park episode. It's coming right at us.
Yeah, but with the exception of the Moss Mountain incident and a few others, that's not normal behavior for most. I mean, the charge in the middle of a group of people shooting at it. That's just so. Was this a rogue animal or
Defending its territory?
Yeah, I mean, because that's not normal for what we hear for these types of encounters anyway. So.
Shydor Sai says DA firearms of that period were smoothbore. First rifle examples introduced mainstream. First rifled mill was at 1803 Harper's Ferry at 54 caliber. This was in 1829, so it's possible they could have been rifled. Common commercial was Kentucky at smoothbore 45 caliber. Well, we know there were flintlocks, so I'm just going to go out and go out on a limb and guess, since these boys were experienced hunters, they were probably, for the most part, carrying 45 caliber smoothbores, and at ranges of less than 20 meters. I can tell you, you give me a black powder rifle, and I will ring steel all afternoon at that kind of range. Heck, I would be willing to bet with the old rifle I used to have. I used to have a 50 caliber Hawken, and even with that, and that was, of course, back before I wore bifocals. But even now, I'd be willing to bet I could ring steel at 100 meters very consistently with that Hawken that I had. Werewolf 5674 says a well-trained and experienced infantryman in the Civil War can fire 3 shots a minute. That's an average reload of 20 seconds. That is freaking awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know if these guys were trained soldier status or how well trained they were. But let's make it 2 minutes. It had two shots a minute. Let's say on average they could fire 2 shots a minute. That's at 9 guys. That's still a lot of bullets going into this thing before they put it down. Eric Kesterman says swamps are humid areas. That's not good for black powder.
No.
Sue Gay says, are the Gugway the same as the face eaters? Yes. Gugway means face eater. Billy Mitchum's not wrong. Yeah, there are some people that I've gone out on the woods with that I took their gun away from them because I was afraid they were going to shoot one of us. That's why when, like Robbie and Anthony, that's why I try to go with people that are either ex-military or law enforcement trained, because I know they're not going to pull their gun and start firing at the first twig break they hear. I want guys that are disciplined enough to know gun doesn't clear the holster till you're ready to shoot. Hey, Ryan's in the house. Hey, Ryan.
What's up, Ryan?
Gary Lowe says proficient soldiers in the Revolutionary War can fire 2 rounds a minute with a smooth bore. Well, that would have either, correct me if I'm wrong here, Rob, your knowledge of history might be better on mine than this. Was the Revolutionary War, were those matchlock or flintlock? Because there is a difference.
I believe those were, and I think they were, most of them were like matchlock,
the old matchlocks.
Fading into the flintlock or starting to go into the flintlock at that time, because I think some of the higher up some like the more of the English probably with the money were in with the flintlocks at that time, and there were more matchlocks on the American side, and they started getting them later on.
I was pretty sure they were mostly matchlock back then.
Yeah.
Kind of like the pirates that roamed the Caribbean, those were matchlock pistols. Like you see the Johnny Depp movies, those were old matchlocks. So those weren't flintlocks. With the Wind says Apalachicola River, Hell's Tate, and OKE are not that far apart. I live in the Mobile area, and the Gulf Coast is my main research area. Swamps like Oke and Apalachicola River are prime habitat. My wife and I have been seriously discussing moving down to that area. And if we do, with the Wind, I would love for you to show me some of those spots. We're really hoping we can get that done here in the next 6 months or so. Shy Dorsai says flintlocks took over in the early 1700s. So they were probably all flintlocks during the Revolution because that was late 1700s. So,
but I would think that a lot of the poorer people that were fighting were probably still using a lot of matchlocks at that time because they weren't.
Yeah, true, during the Revolution. But by 1829, I would say most matchlocks had been phased out by age.
Oh yeah. I thought we were still talking about the
Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
No, I was just trying to get a beat on what type of weapons they likely would have had. But if matchlocks were already being phased out in the early 1700s, then I would say by the end of the Revolutionary War, pretty much everybody, hunters included, would have been using the newer flintlocks.
They were using the Brown Bess, the Charleville musket, Ferguson rifle, American rifles, and flintlock pistols were the primary Revolutionary War guns.
With the Wind says Okie and Suwannee River Basin at night to this day howl after 3 a.m. and wait for an answer. I would be all over that. I would love to do that. I'd set up an audio recorder and turn on my thermal and just hope we got something, which would be fantastic. Flyby Stu's in the house. Hey, Flyby, what's up, brother? Shy Dorsai says for 1829, lots of 1812 surplus. So some of those could have been retired military rifles. But even if they were just, sportsman edition, flintlock rifles, they were probably at the very least 45 caliber smooth bores. And so, weapons aside, at the range they would have been engaging, a long rifle like that would have been very accurate. It would have been very hard to miss something that big at that close a range with a rifle that's good out to a couple hundred meters.
Yeah. Easy.
I was never like competition worthy when I was shooting black powder. I would hunt black powder because you could get extra deer tags that way.
Yeah,
that was the only reason I did it. But I knew guys because they used to have something they called hillbilly days down near Lebanon and down at Bennett Springs State Park. They had it every year. They haven't done it in a long time, and I wish they'd go back to it because it was a lot of fun. But they had muzzleloader target competitions, and these guys would be out there. They'd come from all over, and some of the guys would be out there in full buck skins and everything, like old prospectors and mountain men. But these guys took it serious, and they would get out there and do some pretty amazing stuff with just percussion cap muzzleloader rifles. They were hitting squirrel-sized targets at 100 yards, and just absolutely ringing them. Way better than I ever was with a muzzleloader. It's not like you can throw a scope on a muzzleloader. Not easily, anyway. But those rifles were considerably more accurate than people give them credit, and they packed a hell of a punch.
Well, like if you watch Sergeant York, they did a lot of those the turkey shoots that they had. They still had a lot of muzzle loaders, but even though you had modern repeating rifles, they still used up in the hills up there. They still used a lot of the flintlock pistols because when in the movie, which was pretty historically accurate to his story, because his family was
Mhm.
heavily involved with that movie. If you watch that turkey shoot they had, that's what they're shooting is old flintlock rifles, and he was a pretty good shot.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I would say these guys being experienced hunters, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess none of them were slouches when it came to targeting,
Oh no,
to hitting their
well,
target.
that
Because
was
professional hunters, that's how they fed their family and how they
I'd
made
say
their living.
if you missed, you didn't eat, or your family didn't eat.
Yeah, you went hungry.
Yep, the
Um,
Valley of the Three Wolves.
so I'm going to go. I'm just going to go out on a limb and guess. What would you say, Robbie? 95% of the rounds probably struck a target.
I'd say I'd say high 93% above and above, because hunters back then were not like hunters nowadays, and I'm not because I'm a hunter nowadays.
Yeah.
But for all our equipment and all the stuff we got, the scopes and all that stuff, for the most part, we're out there sport hunting. We're not hunting.
Hmm.
I mean, there are people that hunt to put food on the table. I get it, especially around Fred's area in Alaska. That's how a lot of people, because there's not a supermarket on every corner up there.
Right. The people that what do they call it? Subsistence living.
Yeah, so I get it there, but back then, 95% of the people who lived out on the frontier and out in places like that, that's what they did. They didn't go to the store to buy their food. They grew and hunted what they were going to eat. And it's just people grew up, by the time kids were 10 years old, they could probably outshoot me or you now.
Oh yeah.
Because they had a gun in their hands as long as from the time they were able to stand up, hold it, and shoot it. So, because it not only for food but for protection, defending their land.
Those were tougher times to live in.
Yeah. So I would say, at least 93% and above probably hit. 95 is probably not a bad guess either.
Christy Crawford says we ate everything we killed growing up. Yeah, I'm not a trophy hunter. Never was. Anything we shot was destined for the deep freeze. Even when we'd go out, we'd put out jug lines and bring in stringers of fish. That was all going in a deep freeze. It wasn't catch and release. These days, if I go fishing, I don't eat a whole lot of fish anymore, especially considering some of the crap that's in the rivers and lakes anymore.
And I guess
so I don't eat a whole lot of.
What I meant was that we're not out all the time hunting just to survive and just to eat like they were. I mean,
Right.
We go out and we take one deer, and even if you put it on the wall, the meat goes in the freezer and you eat the meat. But we're not going out with the intent of hunting to feed our family for the entire winter.
Right.
They were.
Yeah. There was a lot more riding on it.
Yeah,
we at least have the option of when times get lean, we can go to Walmart and pick up some food.
Yeah.
Back then, that option didn't exist. There might be a trading post in the area, but the bulk of their survival relied on their hunting skills. So I would say, on average, and I know there's probably a lot of people in this country that don't believe in owning firearms, and we know that. But there are a lot of people that are still from traditional families that have hunted for generations that are still pretty damn good shots. But again, we don't rely on that skill to survive anymore. So I would say pound for pound marksmanship was better than it is now.
Oh, yeah.
Although, we've got a lot better optics and a lot better ballistics. But if you leveled the playing field and gave somebody from then and somebody from now comparable weapons, they'd probably get outshot by somebody that hunted for their existence. Peggy Cole says matchlock effective range was 200 yards and can fire 2 shots a minute. That comes from Google. Well, from the description of this, it came out of the swamp they were up on a little raised area of ground. It charged out of the swamp, roared at them, and then came at them. I'm not guessing. I'm going to guess this thing was nowhere near 200 yards. I'm probably.
Oh yeah.
Safe bet would probably be less than 50 meters when they first saw it.
maybe 200 feet, but
Yeah.
definitely not 200 yards.
Uh,
You see what Gary said?
yeah, I saw that. I've
That's
heard that
funny.
before. I've got a buddy that's got that on a bumper sticker. Ryan from Monster Radio says I did a show with ScaryCast in describing some things from my research area. A lot of people feel me. I have a possible Yi Nautilus in the area. Dude, give me a holler later. Let's talk about that. I'd like to hear more about it. Lene says back in the 1980s when my boys were little, we had a few years where the only meat we got was from what my husband got hunting. When I was a kid, we growing up on the farm. My dad, we didn't we didn't have a whole lot of money. We were dirt poor. I think I was well into my teens before I had a pair of jeans that wasn't a hand me down from one of my older brothers. So we didn't, because we had an orchard, we had a big garden, and we raised hogs. So if we didn't raise it on the farm there, odds are we didn't eat it. So anything that got supplemented, and we had chickens, and we would trade eggs to the people that lived just down from our farm that had a dairy farm. So we would get fresh milk from them in exchange for eggs. So there's no market involved in any of that. Nobody going to town to get that. And we would supplement what went in the deep freeze by fishing and deer hunting and turkey hunting and squirrel hunting. And, if it was a season for it in Missouri, it went in deep freeze.
Yep. And my great grandparents, because I pretty much grew up on their farm, and that's what my great grandfather did. He was a farmer, but he had milk cows that they got their milk from. There's chickens that they got their eggs from. When a rooster got too big for his britches, he was in the deep freeze for fried chicken on Sunday. He had a pond behind his house. We fished, and there was always squirrel and fish and all kinds of game animals out there in Granny's freezer. And she cooked all that stuff, but they also had hogs that they raised for pork. The only thing that they didn't have that they had milk cows. They didn't have any beef cows to slaughter. So that's pretty much the only thing that they went to the grocery store to buy was beef. Like all the vegetables that were cooked and eaten over there were grown on that farm. And that's the only thing I remember them going to the grocery store to buy was beef.
And we would trade. Well, we had a thing that my dad did with my aunts and uncles that lived around our area. Everybody kicked in on the feed, and we had a boar and 2 sows that we kept. And every year they would have big litter of piglets, and all the family would kick in on the feed. And when those piglets got big enough to slaughter, everybody in the family got one. Everybody, there was a big hog boiling day when and that's a smell you don't forget. But they used everything. I mean, my grandparents used to make blood sausage, which that is freaking nasty, and I will not eat it to this day. But they used everything. They even made blood sausage. So when this happened, the whole family turned out, and everybody went home with ice chests full of pork, and that's how a lot of the family got their meat.
I submit to you though that boiling the chicken to pluck the feathers smells worse than boiling a hog.
I don't know.
I hated the smell of them wet feathers after they boiled chicken. God,
that's a pretty big toss up. I'm not sure, but I think I'm going to still go toward hogs.
But to each his own. I didn't mind that smell, but them wet feathers. And I guess
that is a pretty bad smell.
And I guess the reason I didn't mind the hogs because I was too small to help out with that. But Granny always made me help pluck the chickens. I hated that. I still remember the earth-shattering, world-turning feeling of what when my great-grandpa cut the head off the chicken for a rooster for the first time, and the thing got up and took off running. I'm like, It ain't got a head. How's it run? Growing up on a farm mess you up if you ain't careful.
Yeah. Yeah, my grandmother would just go out and grab one, twist it
Bring his
around,
head.
and
Yep.
yeah.
I've seen my great grandma do it. If Paul's out in the field and Granny needed something and didn't want to wait for him to catch it and put it on the chopping block, she'd do that. She'd just go out and
snap them up. You know, I've seen my grandmother do that with a black snake too. Getting into the chickens, just grab it and before it even had a chance to just twist its head damn near clean off.
Yep.
Werewolf 5674 says my grandma said when they'd butcher a hog they used everything but the squeal. You ain't lying.
Oh yeah. Boiling the fat to make
rendering it
lard
down.
and make lard and soap and all kinds of stuff. And
yeah, my grandma used to make lye soap too.
Yep.
Well,
I remember coming in from school in the afternoons and Granny sitting in there churning buttermilk to make butter. I can remember I can sit here right now and I can hear that cadence of that churn with that buttermilk, or with her doing that buttermilk. She always sitting there, had her apron on, and she just sit there churning that butter. Now, people don't think about stuff like that nowadays, or a lot of people don't. If you didn't see that growing up, you know what I'm talking about. Some of the people in the chat know what I'm talking about. That was just, people were just different back then.
Yeah. Kind of, both of my parents were born right before the Great Depression, and people that were born and lived through the Great Depression are a different breed. They saved bacon grease. They reused a lot of stuff. Like I can tell you the number of times they would reuse a sack until it was falling apart. I would go to school with a sack lunch and have to make sure I folded that bag up and rolled it up and put it in my bag and brought it home because that was my sack lunch for the week. If I got it tore up, I didn't have another one. So they saved everything, and we didn't buy store-bought bread. I didn't start getting store-bought bread until after my mom passed. I'd come home from school on a Wednesday and get off the school bus and smell the fresh bread from the bus stop. Mom would make enough bread on Wednesdays to last the whole week, and I would come in and she'd cut me off a hunk of that fresh bread and put a little fresh butter and honey on it. Oh my God.
Yep. My great grandma's cornbread was that way. God, I love that.
Oh, I still love cornbread to this day. Mom had those old cast iron cornbread pans that actually looked like corn. We got way off the topic here. We started out talking about Bigfoot, and now we're talking about home recipes.
Well, we usually always talk about food at some point during the show.
Yeah. Dees says, I know a gal that lives one county over from Ware County, Georgia, Waycross, Georgia. Her papa used to say there are boogers in those woods. A lot of folks around there call them boogers. Yeah, Ware County is where that was. It said that in the article. So that's right there where this incident happened. And when I was a kid, you just didn't pay a whole lot of attention to when your grandparents would say, "Oh, there's a booger in them woods." I just thought they were telling me scary stories. And I remember being pretty little hearing this, like, oh, there's no boogeyman, blah, blah, blah. When I get older and I started remembering when my aunts and uncles would say, there's a booger down in that valley, I think I know what they were talking about.
Yep.
I think there was a lot more common knowledge of this type of creatures than people realize.
Yeah. I've told you, my great grandmother would tell me, don't go down in too far in the wood, or don't go across in the pond in the back pasture, and boogers will get you. Of course, the boogers apparently come up to the back door when I'm watching TV at night, so it didn't matter.
Well, that's how you had your sighting. It was literally right off the back porch.
Yep.
And I keep coming back to something that happened when I was a kid. Our house was kind of a sprawling, single-story house. It's all housing developments now, and it just, every time I drive out through that area, it just breaks my heart because that was old farmland. But my parents' bedroom was on one end of the house, and all my older siblings' bedrooms were on the other end. And there was a tiny little, not much bigger than a closet by modern standards, but this tiny little section right next to my parents' bedroom, that was my bedroom. Being that little, it was weird that, I wouldn't say weird, but I was the only one of the siblings. I'm the youngest of 11 kids, by the way. But I was the only one of the siblings that had their own bedroom. Everybody else doubled up. But they kept me right next to my parents' bedroom. And I remember one time, and this would have been sometime around 1973, 74. I was little, but I remember this vividly. We didn't have central heat and air. We burned wood to stay warm. And if you got hot in the wintertime, in the summertime, you just had a window and a box fan. If you were lucky, most of the time it's just the window open. I remember when I was 3 or 4 that for a good long period of time, my parents wouldn't, and my bed was right next to a window. You put the beds next to the window to get that airflow. My parents did not let me sleep in my own bedroom for quite a period of time. It's kind of been 3 or 4 weeks, because they said there was a screech owl outside my window that would show up at night and would scream in the window. But that memory, like Robbie, like you said, with the memory of how the swaying brought that back. It was a year or 2 ago when that memory came back to me, because somebody mentioned having a screech owl outside their window, and it just kind of jogged that memory with me. But I've been thinking about that a lot. My parents said that there was a screech owl outside my window, but there was no trees outside my bedroom window. There weren't even bushes. I mean, you could push the screen out and crawl out onto the ground, and I did it many times as a kid. There was nothing out there for a screech owl to land on, yet they wouldn't let me stay in my own room for a good long time, because they said there was a screech owl would come to my window at night and scream in the window. Now, I've always wondered that. And by the time it really made something that clicked in my head, of course, both my parents were gone. Mom passed when I was pretty young. And Dad passed when my wife was pregnant with our second son. But I've never really got a chance to sit down and really talk about this with my parents, and I wish I had of.
Yeah, the same way with my instant, because after you and I talked, and I told you some things that they had told me that it never dawned on me that they knew a little bit more than what they're, And I obviously I could go talk to my mom and my stepdad about it, but I would really, really love to talk to my great grandparents about this now.
Yeah, I'd like to know some of the things that they knew back then, which kind of leads us back around to that. As I believe it was Shy was saying, that even to this day there are still people that are saying they are boogers in the woods in that county right there along the Georgia-Florida line. This is a really thickly wooded area, and someone was saying that Karen's got a good point. Karen says your older brothers and sisters remember that. I bet my sister Becky would. I need to sit down and talk to her. My sister Donna, was the oldest of the girls, she's passed. Next time I get a chance to go up, I'll set my sister down and get her a cup of coffee and bring that up and see if she remembers that incident, because I still remember it clear. As close as I ever came to voiding my bowels one night was an owl landed on my windowsill and screeched. Screech owls will scare the crap out of you. And if you're not familiar with what one sounds like, it sounds like blood curdling murder in the woods. I know people that have abandoned camping trips because they thought there was a monster in the woods, and it was just a screech owl. So that's another thing. If you're out doing any kind of cryptid hunting, you need to be familiar with the sounds that the creatures in your area make, because some of them are easy to mistake. With the Wind says Gulf Coast Sasquatch equals boogers, Dogman equals werewolf or rougarou. Any area of swamp or woods that the coon hunters say they avoid, that's the area to go camp. Yeah, there's some areas like that around here. I know some guys, and in fact, I need to talk to my cousin Bill. He used to breed coon dogs, and I would say any area between here and the back end of Fort Leonard Wood that I've written about in my books a few times down near Eminence, Missouri. if he's got any hunting places down there that he avoids, those are the places I want to go. Eric Chesterman says, and he lives here in Missouri, not too far from me. Says a few months back, I had 3 very loud owl calls, followed by 3 very large dog barks, loud dog barks, followed by 3 very loud, strange noises. I believe Bigfoot can mimic other cries. There's been so many accounts where they talk about what they refer to as the 500-pound owl, where it sounded like an owl, but it was just way too powerful and big to be an owl.
Heard one.
I've heard one myself. Like that sounds like an owl, but it's the biggest damn owl I've ever seen. There's a lot of these that they talk about. They refer to the big owl calls. In fact, in Comanche legends, they believe they call it the PM CST, or what they refer to as the Owl Man. But they also refer to it as a giant, as a hairy giant. So that in Comanche legend, I think that is a Bigfoot, because I can understand where Owl Man would come from if they had heard these owl type cries before. So that's another example of a Native American tribe that has its own description of a Bigfoot type creature. And also in a lot of Native American cultures, the owl is a messenger of death.
Mm-hmm.
So jumping back to this case from 1829, we've discussed quite a bit at length the types of weapons they would have had on hand and how accurate they were. Robbie and I are kind of, are kind of on the same page, thinking that at ranges of less than 50 yards and closing quickly with a rifle that long, even a smoothbore, accuracy was probably still in the mid 90s. Just a conservative estimate. And these were experienced hunters. Multiple rounds. We determined that they would probably be able to fire around 2 rounds a minute, and that's assuming they weren't carrying multiple rifles. A lot of hunters did back then. In fact, you watch the movie, what is that? Last of the Mohicans, with Daniel Day-Lewis. When he's trying to hit that target, he fires, boom, and just hands the rifle off. They hit him the next rifle. He goes through 4 or 5 rifles trying to hit that guy running across that field. So it wasn't uncommon for hunters back then to carry more than 1 rifle. Kind of like when I was researching the book that I'm researching now. I was researching Quantrill's Raiders here in Missouri, and it wasn't uncommon for them to carry as many as 12 loaded pistols while they were on a raid. That's a lot of pistols, folks. People get creative when you've got limited firepower. And it's not like today. If Robbie and I went out on a hunt and we took our ARs, it's not like you can just throw 4 or 5 magazines in a pouch on your carrier. They weren't able to do something like that. That's a lot of firepower. Back then, it was a whole different animal. So I can understand why the Raiders carried, sometimes as many as 12 pistols, because fire them till they're empty, either drop them or shove them in their holster, grab the next 2, and go back to firing. So when you're limited on how quickly you can reload, you get creative. That's something I hadn't even really thought, is how many of these hunters were carrying more than 1 rifle or a pistol or both.
Yeah.
So it's possible they hit this thing quite a few times before it hit them.
Well,
the article doesn't say.
Think about a lot of the pirate movies you've seen and things like that. I mean, most of the pirates were carrying anywhere from 4 to 6 pistols.
They have a bandolier with multiple pistols stuck in it. So I could easily see guys like that carrying probably 2 rifles, one in one of those in a sling, in a scabbard or a sling, and the other ready to shoot, and probably a couple of pistols tucked in their belt. So these, I don't think these guys went in unprepared. Adam Kleppy says, new sub here. Hey, welcome to the DAX Machina Nation. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
welcome to the weirdness. We're just scratching the tip of the iceberg.
Oh yeah, and Shy's got a good point on that too.
Mm-hmm. In those days, weight was a factor. They mainly relied on a pistol and knife for backup. Yeah, so if those were flintlock rifles, they probably had at least one flintlock pistol and a really good knife, and in a lot of cases, probably tomahawks. Look at the movie The Patriot. How many tomahawks did he carry as backups?
A lot.
Tomahawk's a versatile weapon. Luis Noriega says a picture of Admiral Nelson when they were ship to ship fighting, and would get boarders. They'd show him with about 6 or 7 pistols around his belt. Yeah, when you had weapons that were slow to load, you carried multiple of them. 443 Big Vic. That's funny.
Chicago Reload.
There's a comment I missed. What the Wind says, locals East Texas through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia will talk about boogers and werewolves and Rougarou to this day. It's not really an uncommon topic. With the Wind, I've had independent corroboration on this type of creature before, but you seem to know quite a bit about swamp creatures. If you could reach out to me at that email address you see going across the bottom of the screen, daroberts@daroberts.net, I'd like to pick your brain about some swamp creatures, in particular Paramal Fae. Eric Kessman says, I love being in my woods. I also know when my visitors are here and when I get the feeling to stay out. I've been in the woods at times when you're just like, you know what, this is not a good day to be here. So let's assume they had one rifle, one pistol, and knife or tomahawk. So even without reloading, they're still hitting it, at least twice a piece before they had to stop and reload. And of course, then once it got to melee range, when it started twisting heads off folks, I don't know if they'd have been using knives and tomahawks or if they would have tried to fall back and reload. Either way, they're still dealing out a lot of damage and finally putting this thing down after it took out, I think it was either 5 or 7 of them that it killed by twisting their heads off. That thing did a lot of damage before it went down.
Yeah.
That
alone
is terrifying.
Yeah, and we've talked about that too. With with something that size, the muscle density and the bone density is going to be far superior to ours. So it's not like you're shooting human with an 1/8 of an inch of skin. You're shooting something that's probably got a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch thick muscle, and then Lord only knows how thick the bone is.
13, just over 13 feet tall with a 6-foot stride. William Nighthawk, yeah, you're absolutely correct. I'm looking to learn more about some swamp creatures for an upcoming book. I'm not a big fan of going out in the swamps because I don't like snakes, and I'm not a real big fan of the concept of getting hit by a gator. But if we end up moving to Florida, I'm going to expand my horizons. I'm gonna look to be going out into some pretty heavy areas, especially now that I've got this treatment for my back and I'm starting to get some mobility back.
And you'll be closer to me.
Hell yeah, we'll get me, you, and the pit bull together, and we'll spend some time out in the woods.
And Doc can fly in, so he's good.
Yeah. Yeah, Ryan says DA just wants to make sure that his name isn't mentioned in the swamp monster lore. There we go. That's funny. Yeah, I know as a hunter, I've had those moments where the woods are just eerily quiet, or you just have that feeling in the air like something bad's going to happen if you stick around. I've left areas both as a deer hunter and going out cryptid hunting because of feelings like that. And again, I just trust my gut on that.
Yeah,
if there's bad juju in the air, there's a reason.
Yeah, and like I told you, that area that we were in, me and Norm and Johnny, the first time me and Johnny went in there, I told Johnny, I said, I feel like something's watching us. And I felt the entire way walking back out until we got past that gate, the big red gate that you have to step over to get onto the trail. I felt that way all the way until we were out past that gate, and then didn't feel like it anymore.
Right.
And that's that what you call it, lizard brain. Just
I refer to it as the lizard brain.
Yeah, just that primal instinct that is ingrained in everybody, but just not everybody listens to. And when you're in situations like that, and in the woods, and in places like you and I have been in law enforcement, and you in the military, if you don't listen to that, sometimes even listening to it doesn't help you. But
Annette reminded me of something just the other day. Well, actually, it was yesterday. Her and I were talking, and we were talking about, of course, now we're both in our 50s, and she's got bad knees, and my back is all screwed up. That we used to go out and like walk trails and go to some pretty wild places. We were pretty avid geocachers there for a long time, and I'm hoping that we can start getting back into that now that, again, like I said, I'm getting some mobility back and I've got the time to do it. But she reminded me of a time we went up to Hawatonka State Park, which is where I set the final scene for Apex Predator Wolf Moon, the first one. Mm-hmm. There's the ruins of an old castle. It's a really creepy area. They don't allow anybody in there after dark. They shut that whole park down at night, at dusk. But it was the time her and I were walking some of the trails, and we managed to get turned around and got off the trail, and we're just in the woods. It's one of those situations where the trail was kind of leaf covered, and we followed the wrong part of it and realized, a little bit later, we weren't even on a trail anymore. And that was one of those times where I just had a really bad feeling, like, something was wrong. And I remember trying to kind of zero in on where it was. And I put myself between her and where I felt like it was, and kept her moving back toward the way we finally found our way back to the trail. But we were in the woods for a couple hours before we found a trail again, and then ran into another hiker, and they pointed us the direction we needed to go to get back to the castle. But the whole time we got off trail and got pretty far back in there, I just felt like almost like we were being very subtly warned to get out of that area. And that area is pretty woolly.
That'd be an American Werewolf in London.
Just about, yeah.
You're safe as long as you stay on the path. What they say?
Stay clear of the moors. Stay clear of the moors.
We're not on the path anymore.
Yeah, that was my realization. Like, I don't even know where the hell we are. And when the wood's pretty thick, it's easy to get turned around in it. But it was in the fall, and there was a lot of leaf litter on the ground. We took what I thought was part of the path, and it wasn't, and we just wound up out in the woods.
You talk about that, and I, you and I, with law enforcement and military and things like that. That stuff that's kind of been drilled into us. The average person probably doesn't get that drilled into them as much as we do. But back then, this group of hunters out there, it wouldn't have been, maybe it would have been drilled into them by their fathers and grandfathers and things like that. Their perception was probably a lot more heightened than ours are. Even you and I.
They were far more in tune with the woods than we would be, because that was their Walmart. That was where they made how they lived. They spent way more time than we would ever. Even back when I was deer hunting and hunting every season I could hunt, I would say these guys spent 10 times more time than I ever did, because there were no seasons back then.
So I just wonder what were they just having a bad night off, or what, that they didn't get that feeling a lot sooner, or were they just so hell bent on trying to find whatever it was that they were just not paying attention to the warning signs going off in their head, because it had to be, because
Oh yeah, they had to have been feeling something ain't right here. Louis Noriega says, working in a hospital, I was working inside an atrium that was sealed out to the patients and visitors, where we had trees and everything growing, and I was cleaning the windows, and I felt the sensation of somebody staring at me, and it was a visitor staring at me through the window, just looking at me, and that was a weird feeling. I'd never had that feeling before, and I went up into the mountains, and I felt that same feeling that somebody was staring at me through the woods. Yeah, you can feel it. I mean, how many times have you, where you being a cop there, Robbie? How many times have you been, working somewhere and just like the hairs on the back of your neck, somebody's staring at you? I've had that happen, many times.
Oh yeah, more times than I can count.
D says, very true, DA, and most of the boys could track as well.
Well, I mean, you had to track, because you shoot something that you didn't hit it in a vital spot, and you had to know how to track. You had to know how to, read the signs. I mean, a lot of times they had to track before they shot them.
Mm-hmm.
So
just to find them,
yeah,
especially if during a drought when game would get scarce, because if folks like I said, if you haven't grown up as a hunter or a fisherman, during times of drought, the animals go where the water goes. If you've got an area that has dried up, you're not going to have so much as a squirrel in your area, because everything's got to have water to live. So you get a bad drought, the animals are going to follow where that water's going. Gary Lowe's got a good point. He says them feeling something might have been why they wanted to make sure the rifles were ready.
That's a good point. It could be.
Mm-hmm. Ryan over at Monster Radio says, people really hate that feeling of being stared at. I get this info from a poll I conducted. Most of the answers were, what the hell are you doing in my house, Ryan?
That's funny.
That's hilarious, dude. It was like, I read somewhere, somebody said, oh, thank you, Qbot. Awesome. Appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much. But someone said, I made my girlfriend breakfast in bed, and I didn't understand the attitude with, all of the, who are you and how'd you get in my house? Shy Dorsey says, for the 1829 incident, these guys were frontiersmen, survivors. They went out there looking for a challenge. They went down swinging. Yeah, it absolutely says they went down swinging. With the Wind says, swamps aren't that bad. Only difference is using a boat to get in and out. And yes, alligator, snakes, bugs, and lots of bugs. Mosquito, facial net, long sleeve are your friend. We'll send my email, FYI. Awesome. Yeah, that's one of the things. If I'm going to be going, I'm going to get a really good pair of snake boots. Karen Polson says, would the hunt group that went back in been on horseback or on foot? I would have guessed they would have had to have been on foot, because a horse can travel a lot farther in a day than a person could. And this was right on the Florida-Georgia line. 2 weeks on horseback probably would have put them down near, well past Ocala, probably damn near to Miami. 2 weeks on horseback's pretty far. 2 weeks on foot into a swamp, not so much. So I seriously doubt they took horses into an area that was, even if dry, was a known swampy area, because they would have no way of knowing what they were getting into. So my guess is they were on foot. The article did not say. Linda Collins says, went camping in northern Arkansas a good while back, pitched tents by the river that we were canoeing in. What river was it? Just out of curiosity. During the early morning hours, I couldn't sleep. All I heard was someone walking around the two tents. Did not want to look out to see what it was. Was that, by chance, anywhere near the Current or Jack's Fork rivers? Just out of quite curiosity. There's a lot of stories very similar to that come from campers. St. Joe, I think. Okay. There's a lot of stories that come from campers, especially near the Jack's Fork and the Current rivers.
Wasn't one of those where you said you talked to your buddy that was canoe fishing, and wasn't that one of those places?
No, that was on the Gasconade.
Okay,
Yeah, I was
I was
on the,
thinking that was
that was here in Missouri, where he was fishing and rounded a bend, and it was just hunched down at the edge of the water eating a fish. And he said
Yeah.
he looked at it, it looked at him, and they just kept eye contact as he went by, and he started to get out of range, and it went back to eating the fish. And he said he paddled a little faster and got the hell out of there.
What'd you do? Got the hell out of there.
Well, William, I tell you what, you got a standing invite. You find yourself in Missouri, we'll go find us. We'll go shake some trees and get something out of here, and scare something up. You just get to feeling better. Let me know when you're feeling up to it, and we'll go somewhere. Well, hell, we'll go to LBL if you want.
I still want to come up to Williams' neck of the woods and maybe get some dog man experience going on. Because I don't think Williams too far from me.
I think he's up in the Virginia area.
Mm-hmm.
Lewis says horses can travel like 30 miles a day, and that's how the missions were here in California were based. At every 30 miles, you can ride to the next mission before you wake up in the morning, and before you go back to bed, you can go from mission to mission. They were 30 miles away. That makes sense. It's like stagecoaches. The reason they got the name stage was every stage of the journey from sun up to sundown was where they could stop and rest the horses and let the passengers out. And it was usually little stage outposts where they would stop. Same thing with the Pony Express. They would hit these stops, switch out horses, and continue riding, because you can only push a horse at full gallop for so long before that horse will either ride it to death, or you're going to break its wind and it'll never be able to be ridden again. With the Wind says, Porch Band of Creek Indians Tribe Reservation BIA Police, be great people to speak with about considering your background. Yeah, if I can get down that way, I would definitely like to. I tell you who I really would like to be able to get in and talk to, and it'd be, I don't have any contacts in it, is the Osage Nation here in the Ozarks, because this area where I live in and where I've had most of my weird stuff was all Osage land. Hell, even down in Moon Valley, where I said a short story because there's so many weird things. We used to find artifacts down there, and the one of the professors at the University of Missouri at Rolla, he looked at it and goes, "Yeah, this is all Osage stuff." So this whole area, Southwest Missouri, was primarily Osage. I wish I had a contact within the Osage Nation, but it may be one of those things I just got to make a trip and introduce myself and hope they don't look at me like I'm an idiot and tell me to get the hell out.
You want to do what?
You want to ask us about what? Now you sounds like you've already been into the peyote. You need to kick rocks.
Oh, what'd they tell
Mike? Says Niagara River's loaded. That was right where we used to find them, down in Moon Valley along the Niagara. We used to find arrowheads and stuff. And Eric, if you haven't been down in Moon Valley, or if you have, as you come down from the Windyville side and come down into that valley, into Moon Valley, when you reach the low water crossing, if you look out across that field to the left, there's a huge bluff about 300 yards down that valley. There are caves in that bluff, and we found all kinds of stuff in those caves. That's all private property now, and we can't get back in there. It used to be a campground, so we would go in there all the time. But the campground, the guy that owned the campground sold it all out, and it's all got the purple fence posts up around it now. You can't go on that land. I have no idea who owns it, because if I could find out, I would see about maybe setting up an expedition down in there, because that would be a fantastic place to go down and do some recording. But you can't camp down there now, because all the available land that you could camp on is now private property. Sorry, I was looking to see if I'd missed any questions. Hope I didn't.
Yeah, I saw some comments.
But when you compare this account in 1829 to what happened at Moss Mountain in 1819, multiple states apart. One was in Florida, the other was in the Georgia-Florida line, the other was in Arkansas. But there's so much eerie similarities in the way they were attacked. Multiple victims killed. The way they were killed, in the case there in the swamp, they were getting their heads torn off, but they were being completely dismembered on Moss Mountain. And there was multiple creatures. It makes me wonder, had there been more than one creature, would have been the one in 1829 would have probably been a story we never heard of. It probably would have just been in 1829. Some guys went out into the woods and never came back. Louis Noriega says, police can 50 miles away from 29 Palms, where Patton trained out there. To me, it was finding all the 50 caliber bullets. I'll turn the desert. My cousin found an Indian arrowhead out in the middle of the desert, and I wish I stepped on it. If you're using voice text, it's messing it up, man. I wish I still had a lot of the arrowheads and like pottery shards that I found when I was a young man. My father and I never really got along that well. That's not a news flash or anything. But I left a bunch of stuff in storage in my dad's attic when I left for the Army. And when I came home from leave, he'd sold it all in a yard sale. Still a little salty about that. This is one of those stories that I believe, I wholeheartedly believe this actually happened. I don't think this is an urban legend. I don't think it's a myth. I think it is one of those cases that there's just too many similarities to other events that have happened in other places with people that had no contact. Because all these events happened in times when, it might have been in newspapers, but what's the odds some guy in Arkansas is going to read a newspaper from an event that happened in Florida from 10 years before and then have almost the same thing happen to them?
And two, nowadays people will come up will fake these stories or hoax these stories because they want their 15 minutes of fame. Back then, people were not looking for 15 minutes of fame.
Most people didn't want attention.
Yeah, and so there was nothing for them to gain by telling this story because it wasn't like they were going to be famous for finding this thing. I mean, because it was more widely accepted that things like that existed back then. So they weren't looking for that. So there was you didn't have the same reason to hoax these things like people do now. So you got to throw that reasoning out the window because they weren't saying it just, okay, I'm going to be famous by this. This is going to get me rich. Like people nowadays are saying, well, if I'm the one that, gets 1,000 views or 100,000 views, I'm going to get rich off this. I mean, there's no motive like that back then. So just for that reason alone, I would tend to believe that it's real, but there's plenty of other reasons that, that DA's already mentioned that this story just rings true.
Yeah, there's so many details. Sorry, it's always when we're live when my phone blows up, and I look down my screen and I was like, and it says message from Cameron Buckner. I'm like, oh, I think I'm gonna take a second to answer that one.
I always got to answer when Cam calls.
Yeah, Cam doesn't text me very often. Eric Tushman says that deal I sent you on Messenger about the bear attack that just hit me. He found the body torn apart, although it's been a couple of years after the disbelief, but the gun broken, bullets all over. Yeah, that's not a typical bear attack. Where was that one? I just didn't mean to get rid of that. Linda Collins said, what's the strangest experience y'all ever had? I'll let you go first, brother.
Strangest, I'd say probably that one that Norman, Terry, and I had. And I told you about it when we were up there, and the day we went up there and set the trail cams up, and we walked back out, and I always have that feeling that something's pacing you or watching you till you get past that gate. Well, we got past the gate. We're standing out there in the parking area, and I use the term parking area very loosely. It's just a big kind of horseshoe turnaround where you can pull your vehicles up and park, and then you have enough room to turn around and get back out. When we were sitting there, I'd done taken my plate carrier off and put my rifle in the truck, and we were standing there talking. I still had my handgun on my side. Norm still had his. He'd done put his rifle up. So we were just kind of sitting there, just BS and kind of talking about when we were going to come back and get the cameras and all this kind of stuff. And like, if the way I'm facing y'all, the woods kind of went up into the trees and up on the hill, but it was out past the main trail area. So off to our right, we hear something kind of skitter and fall down a hill a little ways, probably 15, 20 feet worth of sliding down the hill. Norm and I looked at each other. We're like, what was that? Because it wasn't a rock. It was something big, considerable size. Deers don't fall out in the woods hardly. They're way too agile for that. Way bigger, too big to be a squirrel. Yeah, it could have been a bear. So, but anyway, we kind of start making our way over that way. And as we're going that way, something makes a big racket and off back over on the other side of the gate. So instinctively, what we do, we all three turn back over that way. Well, as soon as we turn back that way, back up the hill, whatever that was goes. And then you hear it way back off in the distance, making its way back over there. To me, that's scary because it's intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that was over there fell because it was over there watching us. And this is just my personal opinion of what happened, obviously. But something was watching us over there. It fell down the hill a little ways. Knew we were coming to it. So something over here made a distraction. So this one could get back over to the other side. And that was pretty strange.
Yeah, I would see how that would definitely qualify. I think for me, one of the weirdest things I've ever had happened to me, and I can't say it was cryptid. I don't know what it was because I didn't stick around. But I was late at night. Would have been a year ago in July. A year ago last July, so it would have been July of what is this, 23? So it would have been July of 21. I was in LBL, and I went down to a place called Demumbers Bay, and it was late. Probably in retrospect, not the smartest place for me to have been alone and unarmed, because at the time I was under the impression you couldn't carry firearms in LBL, and I found out more recently that you can carry a pistol, but they don't want you unregistered hunting in there. So they would look kind of frown if I was walking around with my AR on my single point. But a pistol on my hip would probably not even get a second glance. So knowing that now, I would not have been unarmed, but I was at the time because, misunderstood the provisions. Well, anyway, I went down to Demumbers Bay, and God, it had to be 1 or 2 in the morning. It was somewhere late because I was running all over the north part of LBL. So some of the areas from the stories that I'd heard, and the Demumbers Bay is probably only 2 miles at the most from the campground where the famous LBL incident supposedly happened, where the family of 4 was killed. And then later, after this incident happened to me, I found out that an incident where 2 people were supposedly killed right there at Demumbers Bay where I was at had been witnessed by a guy from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. But I didn't know about that story at the time. And I got down there, and I got out of my van. And again, I was the only one down there. It was late. And I walked down and into the woods, walking by flashlight. And I got over I followed the edge of the lake, went down. And Demumbers Bay is absolutely beautiful. And with the moon over that bay, it was just really stunningly beautiful. But it was oddly quiet. And the whole time I was in North LBL, the whole week I was there, never saw a single animal, not one. I get my phone out and just on a whim, I played a couple of predator calls, and I didn't have my Bluetooth speaker, which I usually have with me because it gets pretty loud. All I was playing was just off the speaker on the phone, but I was right on the edge of the water, and you know how sound tends to travel over water. And I played a couple of dying rabbit calls, and again, in retrospect, not probably the smartest thing I ever did out there by myself unarmed. But almost immediately after playing them, I heard something approaching from my left at a fairly high rate of speed, just like coming through the woods. And I heard something kind of behind me and to my right coming at a fairly high rate of speed. And that's when I realized I'm unarmed and nobody knows where I'm at. So I kind of beat feet down the edge of the edge of the lake over to the little gravel parking area, jumped in my van, shut the door, and fired it up. And as I was backing out, I had my headlights up on bright. I panned that section of woods where I'd just been, and there were 3 sets of eye shine watching me from the woods. They weren't close enough I could see what they were, but there was 3 sets of eye shine watching me from the woods, and I was like, what the hell is out there? Again, never saw it other than the eyes and heard something approaching. Could have been deer. I highly doubt it. I've never heard of deer responding to a predator call, but something came up there. Wish I had been able to catch that on video, but at the time I didn't have a thermal or a low light camera. I was literally filming with my phone, and my phone really didn't pick up anything other than it was dark and I had headlights on. But I wish I'd had better equipment to have gotten the reaction, but it was immediate. If I'm playing that predator call, something was coming toward me, and they had really just zeroed right in on where I was. And that was pretty freaking terrifying. D says guts, DA. No, I think that was just sheer stupidity. Not really thinking things through on my part. I wouldn't do it again. Yeah, I definitely would. I would if I did that again in that same spot, I would have at the very least Robbie and Anthony and maybe Doc with me and have them all armed. And of course, I would be armed. And we would be much closer to a vehicle if we had to fight our way out of there. But that area is just really creepy. And again, had I known about the people that had been killed in 1974, literally 50 yards from where I was standing, I probably wouldn't have been out there at 2 o'clock in the morning. I probably wouldn't have been out there at all. Miss Lene, go ahead and for bed. We'll have you have a good night. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Miss Lene. Good night.
And yeah, folks, keep Miss Lene in your prayers as well. She's still struggling with some of her own health issues. So we love Miss Lene around here. She is awesome. She's not only one of my moderators, she's one of my alpha readers, and she's got some wonderful insight on this new book. Jake Clayton says, that's a real here's your sign moment. Yeah, in retrospect, not the brightest thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, Shy said you was going for the Darwin Award.
Or missing 411 case, one of the two. I told my wife about it, and she's like, you're an idiot. Why were you even down there? She just thought I was driving around. She didn't know I was going to get out anywhere. We're at 1:45. Should we talk about our affiliate programs before we hit the 2-hour mark, and then we can look at things from there.
Sure.
Because I'm not sure I'm ready to quite wrap up, but I definitely want to make sure we don't forget to do the affiliates. How about we hear from old Doc himself? What do you think?
Let's hear from the little guy.
All right, little old Doc himself.
Hey, everybody, this is Kerry Pocket Doc Davis from Dark Angel Medical, and you are listening to DA Ex Machina with DA Roberts. You may recognize me or some of my products from Dark Angel Medical in some of the Apex Predator, Lakeview Man, and Wild Hunt books, and you can get those products at www.darkangelmedical.com, along with training classes on how to use those products and save a life. Shoot us an email at at darkangelmedical.com and be the difference.
And Dark Angel kits, I don't just promote them because Doc's a buddy of mine. I carried one of their kits, a trauma kit, on my belt as a cop, and I wouldn't trust my life to any other kit. Just absolutely the best kits out there. It is. I mean, when I was in LBL, I had one of them on me. I wish to God I'd had a firearm on me, but I carried one of their kits for years as a cop, and I wouldn't trust my life to any other kit. They have what's called the Kit for Life Guarantee. If you use that kit to save a life, including your own, they will resupply that kit for life for free. And if you use the code that's on there right now, I had the wrong. I think it's Dark Angel. I need to have Noah give me a list of the commands because I don't know them all. But if you use there it is. Yeah, that's what Dark Angel is.
Yeah,
if you follow one of those, if you follow that tiny URL there in the chat, that'll take you over to darkangelmedical.com. And if you use the discount code Cryptid25, you'll get 25% off your entire order. And again, like I said, they are literally the best med kits in the business. It's absolutely fantastic kits. In this day and age, it is much better to have a kit and not need it than need it and not have it. Because if you ever need it and don't have it, you might never need one again. So go check them out. And remember, if you're going to go out anywhere, camping, hunting, fishing, hiking, backpacking, you might be off the grid for 911 emergency services, and that kit might be the only thing that saves your life. I definitely recommend carrying a med kit, and of all the kits I've ever carried, Dark Angel is the one I will stand by. Do you want to talk about the other one?
Sure. All right, folks. We like Doc with the Dark Angel. It's a veteran-owned company. Doc's a friend of ours, so how we feel about our veteran-owned companies. Our other affiliate, Scallywag Tactical, have some of the best blades that you could ever own or ever try to buy if you're going to buy a knife. They've got every kind of knife that you can put. Like DA's got the Gunner's Mate. This is the Dew Claw. If you like this one, you better get a hold it quick. They still got some, but this one is going to be discontinued. These are very robust, full tang knives. They've got fixed blades like the two that we showed here. They've got folders. That's the Jolly Roger, right, DA?
Mm-hmm. Jolly Roger.
Jolly Roger. They've got, I would grab my Orca, but it's on my duty gear because I carry that every day. That's the Orca. Or no,
this isn't the Orca.
It looks like that's the same color, but that's the, which one is that? That's not the Sailor Assisted.
Yeah, that's the Sailor Assisted. Yeah.
Okay.
Watch it when you basically just.
Yeah, and most y'all that are normal or are normal people, you've seen how sharp these knives are out of the box. That's the Orca. These knives, I have not put the first stone or anything on this knife. These knives are super sharp, and they will cut you if you're not careful. I mean, it's straight out of the box, one of the sharpest knives, best material. They use 5150. They use stainless steel. I think some of their knives, they use a combination of stainless and another kind of hardened tool steel. Whatever they do to make these knives keep these edges. I mean, I've cut cardboard with this knife. Cardboard will dull a knife quicker than anything. And that knife is still, like I said, I have not done anything to the edge since I've had it. And I've had it since before Christmas.
This is my everyday carry knife. It goes everywhere with me. It opens everything from Amazon packages to opening letters, slitting the top of a letter. It cuts twine. It's literally the knife I use for my everyday knife tool when I carry, and it is still just wicked stupid sharp. And I don't really need to put it on a stone.
Nope. So you head on over to Scallywag Tactical. You follow the code that's on the screen. Some of them are over in the chat. use code DA Roberts 10 and you get 10% off of your order. Good thing about that is they've got something that's called the Blim Blade collection. A lot of times a box will get dropped in the shop or in packaging or whatever, and the box will get damaged and they can't sell it as new, so they'll discount it. So you'll get a discount on that, and then this discount code will stack up on that.
Right.
Anthony bought a whole bunch of knives, and it all stacked, and they're all blemish blades. DA's gotten some blemish blades.
Most of mine are.
This one was a blemish blade too, and there is nothing wrong with this knife. There is not a mark on this knife. Some of them you'll have some forge marks or maybe some scuffs or some nicks or something like that. But 9 times out of 10, it's the box. That's what's messed up on it. And that's why they can't sell it as new. But head on over, use the code DA Roberts 10 to get 10% off your purchase. Veteran-owned company. Craig's a super, super nice guy who, he's give DA a ton of information about, these knives are featured heavily in DA's books. Gunner's Mate, the boarding axe. The
Bounty.
The Bounty. That's another one that's in there. I think Clark even carries one of the. I think he carries one of the folders in his pocket most of the time. Right?
Oh yeah. That's the Bounty.
That's pretty much a sword right there.
Basically. And the handle of it's big enough you can get both hands on it.
And it's just as sharp as any of the rest of them. But they've also got kitchen knives. You want to block a good kitchen knife. DA's got one of those too, and I've heard him rave about those ever since he got them. They've got some beautiful Damascus
knives. I was putting that away, yanking headphones out of my ears.
I was just telling him about your kitchen knives that you got from them, how much you love those, rave about those. They've got some beautiful Damascus blades.
Mm-hmm. I was cutting tomatoes in the kitchen the other day with one of those kitchen knives, and it was just like, I'm like, oh my God, this is going to take a fingertip off if I'm not careful.
You have a good knife when you're scared of it.
Yeah, I have a healthy respect for my kitchen knives.
If you're not scared of your knife, it's not a good knife. It doesn't have an edge on it. If you are scared of your blade, then you've got a good blade.
Yeah.
And I make
any one of these knives just straight out of the box are just so freaking sharp, and they hold an edge like no other knife I've ever owned.
Yep.
So head over to Scallywag Tactical, check them out. Use discount code DA Roberts 10 at checkout for 10% off your order. That includes on the blemish blade. Let them know we sent you, which we would much appreciate. Craig Burhart's a great guy. He's a U.S. military veteran. That's a veteran-owned company, and we're big supporters of our veteran. Not only our veteran businesses, but our veterans in general here at DAX Machina. Everybody, guys, I'm a huge supporter of the 22 a day foundation, helping to end veteran suicide because we lose 22 a day, and I want to see that get down to zero. Anything else you want to
add? Well. As long as we're talking about that, the Wounded Warrior Fund is also another good one. If you want to help with that, I have personally donated to that one several times. I've done the Ice Bath Challenge for that. That's another good one. If you're looking for some good 22 a day Wounded Warrior Fund, and if you want to support local or veteran-owned companies, Dark Angel Medical, Scallywag Tactical.
The Valhalla Project is another good one.
Yes, another good one.
Because everything that they sell, they've got T-shirts. In fact, my coffee mug that I have right here, it says "Honor Their Sacrifice" on it. Came from the Valhalla Project. That's valhallaproject.com. Everything that they sell, the proceeds go to veterans charities. Specifically, their big charity is the 22 a day foundation. But Valhalla Project, they've got some amazing T-shirts. They've got all kinds of really cool stuff. So I'm a proud supporter of veterans charities.
Yep. Karen wants to talk about the books.
Okay. Yeah, we can definitely spend a few minutes talking about the books.
Yeah. And we always say we need to talk more about the books, and sometimes we do, sometimes we forget. So,
Well, let's let Miss Naoma tell us a little bit about them, and then we'll go from there.
all right.
From the mind of author D.A. Roberts. Cryptids. Lakeview Man. Apex Predator. Codename Wild Hunt. Zombies. The Ragnarok Rising Saga. Science fiction and fantasy. Lost Legion. Find them all at daroberts.net or amazon.com.
I love that commercial, but it's a few books behind now. We need to get that one updated.
Yeah. That's a few off.
I believe last week I showed the cover for the new book.
Yes. Go ahead and show it again. I'm there. I see a few new names in the chat.
This is the cover for the book that's in edits right now. I was hoping to have the edits done by tonight, but I'm doing a deep dive on the edits. In fact, I went back and added more material to the book on the first round through edits. I added some dialogue. I changed some details. I moved some things around. I need to send it out to my alpha readers so they can look at the changes, because while some of them are subtle, some of them are not quite so subtle. But there's a lot of information that a lot of new stuff in there. I hope the alphas will take a look at before I finish the edits. I'm probably going to be another couple of days on the edits, and then we'll see where we are from there. But I hope to have release information on this book.
Would some of these changes be something that I might know something about, or
they might be? They just might.
You seem like you thought that might be a pretty good idea.
This book is set in 1865. It's a cryptid hunting series. A guy just fresh out of the Civil War, by not really by any choice of his own, winds up hunting monsters. And it's an action, a high action book.
Oh yeah.
A lot of stuff it ties in. There's a lot of historical tie-ins, and it will tie into all of my current project books as well. It has roots that lead all the way up into not only Lakeview Man, but Apex Predator and Codename Wild Hunt. These series are all linked. Even my sci-fi, there are links that bear it out to the rest of the series at large.
Yep. Man's Marauders is connected. Ragnarok Rising series is connected. There, I mean, DA and I've said this off camera, but I'll say it now. How he keeps all this stuff straight, I'll never understand, because I know how sometimes I get confused going back to write a report from talking to 2 or 3 people 20 minutes prior, and I'm like, what I have to go back and watch my video of my body camera sometimes, and he's got like 6 series that he keeps tied together. I'm not just
lots
saying
of notebooks. Lots of notebooks.
I'm not just saying this because DA is one of my friends. He's one of my good friends, one of my closest friends, one of my best friends. But his books, if you like action and you like cryptids, you're going to like this. And Doc and I joke around and call him, what is it we call you? The
Tom Clancy.
The Tom Clancy of cryptids. Yeah, he laughs every time we say it, but we're not saying it just to make a joke. It's true. I mean, Tom Clancy's got some of the best action books out there. I love Hunt for Red October. Was one of my favorite books to read. His what was it? The Jack Ryan series that the Harrison Ford movies were based on. Those are great books, but it's just the military espionage, that kind of stuff, and it's great. But how much better is it when you throw cryptids in there? And I mean, just you can't go wrong. He laughs at this too, but I said it's like my crack, because it's like It's cryptids, it's military, it's police, it's werewolves, it's Bigfoot. I mean, it's all this stuff wrapped up into one series. So you can't go wrong. And all his stuff is based on real world experience that he's either talked to people and gotten stories from of or things that he has experienced in his law enforcement military career. So, everything from like the knives that are used are real world knives. The guns are real. I mean, real companies.
One of the guns they use is, this. It's the Guncraft. I've got a Guncrafter Industries T-shirt.
Yeah. So, to me, that kind of attention to detail, that's the kind of stuff that makes me think, okay, this guy, and this is before I knew DA, this is what I was thinking. This guy has done his homework. He's done his research. It's not just somebody going and putting words on a piece of paper. Anybody can throw words down on a piece of paper, but that does not make them an author, and it doesn't make them a storyteller. Anybody can pen a book and go nowadays and get it published. That doesn't make them an author. DA is not only an author, he's a storyteller. And stories are what keeps people coming back for more. And, as somebody who has read every one of, how many times I tell you I've read Lakeview Man now? Like 20?
3 or 4. Oh, like 20 times? It was more than I thought.
I've probably read that book 20 times. Nothing changes. It's the same story, but it's so that was the second one I read, I think. Because I got into them out of order. The first book I read was the first Wild Hunt book, which I loved. And that's what got, I'm glad I did, because that line in the book's what got me to send you the email and got us being friends.
Little Patty cracks. She's absolutely right. I do ask Doc for medical information. If Doc was here, you could ask him. He's probably listening because he's not feeling well. He's got a sinus infection, but he can tell you how many times he's gotten a 2:00 in the morning text from me. Hey, asshole, you awake?
Yep.
Like, I need to pick your brain. I've written myself into a corner. But yeah, if it's not for personal experience, I talk to people who have had these personal experiences, and I've always believed that any story that he's told that you ever read is only as good as the details that it sets on. Like, for example, I've read some books that were otherwise pretty well written books, but the first time they refer to as changing the clip in their pistol, I'm like, he's not a shooter. He doesn't know what he's talking about. It just draws into question literally every other detail they write. Or somebody says they clicked off the safety on their Glock. No, you didn't. Glock's trigger has a trigger safety. These are details that you only get through experience or thorough research. I try to make sure all the little details are there that form the foundation for the big details to rest on, because if that foundation cracks at some point, all the big details are going to fall.
Yeah, for you to suspend your belief in reality and go into that world, you have to be able to buy into it. And if you can't buy into it because you can't get behind what the author is saying or what he's trying to say, then he's already lost you. But if you can read that book, and it's like I tell DA, when I read these books, I can imagine these things. And he said that's exactly what he wants. He wants people to play this out in their head, which is exactly what I do. And I can't tell you how many times me, him, and Doc and Anthony have sat here and we've all discussed, if any of these books went to movies, who do we think would play the characters? And he loves that.
Oh yeah, love it.
Because he's got in his mind who he thinks, big star wise, should play all these characters, but he loves to hear who everybody else.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love to hear how people see these characters.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's like I get to experience something I wrote through someone else's eyes. I get to see how they see it, and that, to me, that's just absolutely amazing.
And I know I sound like a fanboy here, but really, if you haven't read his books, I recommend read them in order, because sometimes you can miss things, or because I've done it. And he's called me on it. He's like, well, goofball, if you'd read it in order, you'd already understood that. But here's the thing: if you're on the fence and you're like, I don't know, I will make a suggestion to you. Either read The First Wild Hunt or read Lakeview Man. Read one of those. If you haven't read any of his books, read one of those. Either one of those that you read, be prepared. It's going to grab a hold of you. It's going to suck you in, and you're going to be wanting the rest of them. Or if you the kind that likes to read it in order, get on DARoberts.net, I believe is where the timeline is, DA.
I posted the link right now.
You can get on
That's the best order to read them in.
That's the preferred order, which I went back and read, and that's probably why I've read Lakeview Man a couple of times extras, because I went back and read everything in order. And the fact that Lakeview Man and The First Wild Hunt are two of my favorite books in the series, or the whole shooting match, basically. But, I'm the type of go ahead.
I said, when I started to write these books, when I had the foundations for multiple series, I did something that I wanted to do a long time ago. I've wanted to be a writer since I was a kid. And years ago, when I was a young man, I read the J.R.R. Tolkien books, The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings. And it hit me when I finished reading the books that even though they were individual books, and if you've read The Fellowship of the Ring, The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, if you read the Return of the King, if you've read those 3 books, there are actually 2 books in each of those books. So it's really 6 books. So you're getting 2 books per book. But when you read that, any one of them could stand alone and be a solid story. But when you read all of them together, it's really one big story. The whole thing tells one enormous epic story, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted all of my books to tie in. You can read any of the series standalone. You can read any of the books standalone, and because I put in footnotes and things like that to explain references that go back to other books. But if you read them in the order that I've got on that timeline, there's a much larger universe and there's a much bigger story at work.
Mm-hmm. And it's still evolving as we speak.
Very much so.
And that, like the Dark Frontier, chronologically, yes, it goes back and predates Lakeview Man and Ragnarok Rising. I think Perdition's Flame technically would be first, because that goes back.
When you look at the timeline, since it's sci-fi and set in the future, it's farther down the timeline chronologically. But as for actually when I wrote that book while I was still writing the Ragnarok book. So, real world chronological, it's one of my earlier novels.
Right.
But timeline of the DA verse, so to speak, the DA verse, it falls pretty far down the timeline because it's set 500 years in the future.
And the same thing with Man's Marauders. I mean, that's way on into the future too. So, but that right there is a good standalone story. But if you've never read some of the other books and you read that book, you're going to miss some really good Easter eggs. Because I got to that one part and I was like, I knew it. And you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. Qbot says, is there any way you could name your books that have been made into an audiobook? The Lost Legion, Perdition's Flames, and Blood and Honor are both completed. Perdition's Flames is out. We're having some problems with Amazon releasing Blood and Honor. Sal Passos and I are working on that, trying to figure out what's the holdup with Amazon. They haven't released it yet, but it's done. Lakeview Man is out. Awakening, the first book of the Ragnarok Rising saga, is out on audio, as is the first 2 books of the Codename Wild Hunt series, both narrated by Cameron Buckner. Numerous short stories that are narrated by Cameron Buckner and a couple by Naoma. The first book of the Apex Predator series is out, narrated by Cameron Buckner. You can find all those over on his channel for free. You can listen to them for free on his channel. I think that's it at the moment. But I've already been kind of talking to Cam about getting this new one into audio as soon as possible. I know he's working on the third of the Codename Wild Hunts now, but he's really swamped at work. So he's trying to get some work caught up so he can finish up Codename Wild Hunt Operation Blood Eagle. So hopefully it'll be done soon. But yeah, we've got a lot of projects in the work. The problem is with Lakeview Man and Ragnarok Rising, I lost the narrators. They did the first book of the series, and they weren't able to commit to the rest of the series. So I'm going to reach out to both of those narrators and see if they would be willing to release the contract so I can start the series over and have the same narrator throughout. If that happens, Cameron Buckner's already laid dibs on the Ragnarok Rising series. He wants to do that. I'm probably going to have Doc do Lakeview Man and possibly the Nightmare Hunter series. So Doc's in the process of getting his sound equipment set up. But at the moment, Cameron Buckner's my primary narrator, and I will keep doing projects with Cam as long as he wants to do them. He does a fantastic job. Even when he mispronounces words, it's words that if I was reading the book and didn't have a clue how I would just take a shot at it too. So he reads it how I would read it in my head if I didn't recognize the word. And there's a couple of words I've said, hey, this is how this is pronounced, and he still does it. So, but I just find it funny at this point. So I enjoy when he butchers a word. I enjoy it. I mean, Cam does a fantastic job, but he reads it just like I would read it to myself. If I didn't know what a word was, I'd just take a guess at it and move on.
Well, Cam doesn't sound like some of these audiobooks I've got. You've got these narrators that's you can tell that's exactly what they're doing is they're just reading it. Cam makes you feel like he is actually telling you the story. And I think that's what's so good about Cam is because he didn't just sit up there and read your books. Like it's like, and you just said it. It's like it's almost like it's your inner monologue with a voice. And it's just I love the way Cam reads your books.
I do too. Very happy with Cam.
But yeah, the Steve Lilly series, yeah, that's some. We need some more Steve Lilly crossovers with the Wild Hunt too.
I've already got another Steve Lilly story in the works. It's going to be entitled Apex Predator Lily Moon. It's probably going to be 15 to 20,000 words, a good size short story. Probably 15 to 20,000 words is really a novella. I told Cam I'd try to have that done into him in the next couple of weeks. So look for another Steve Lilly DA verse crossover coming up very soon. And I've got already outlined plans for 3 or 4 more Steve Lilly crossover stories. There's going to be a Steve Lilly crossover for the Lakeview Man series, another one for the Codename Wild Hunt series, and one for a series that has not been named yet. So we've got some interesting times coming. A lot of projects I'm going to be working on with Cam.
Doc and the brothers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're coming back. Yeah, if any of y'all are familiar with the last Steve Lilly story I did was a Codename Wild Hunt Operation Lily, where Steve Lilly met the crew from the Wild Hunt. I introduced 2 characters, Matches and Jedediah Bowie. They're going to be back. I really liked those 2 guys, and now that they're aware that there are monsters out there, they're not going to shut up about it. They're going to get involved.
So if there's anybody out there that hadn't read them, just go read them. Just pick one of those 2 and read it if you're on the fence. I guarantee you won't be disappointed, and you'll get the rest of them.
And if you're a member of the Patreon community, and it's patreon.com/DARobertsAuthor, let me throw that if I know the commands. I think that was the right command. I guess I'll know in a second. Yep, that was it. Let me put up the banner for it too. If you're a member of the Patreon community over at patreon.com/DARobertsAuthor, there are several short stories that are published nowhere else, and won't be for a good long while. There's excerpt from the current book that isn't published yet. There's 2 chapters up of it for people for the members of the Patreon community to read. There are a number of levels of support, and I'm going for the people that are at the upper end of it, they're going to have characters named after them in the book, in a book series. So that's in the works as well. But there's a lot going on over at the Patreon community. A lot of short stories and unpublished works that aren't available anywhere else that you can only find on the Patreon. Some of them, actually all of them, will see print eventually, but some of them are probably months down the road before any of them are even released to the public. So hopefully you guys will check out or patreon.com/DARobertsAuthor, because it really does help keep the wheels in motion. Shai says his books are very enjoyable even when he trolls us by killing off characters. Well, when you've got a high action, a lot of fights going on, sometimes you lose characters. Toshi the Wolf says, "Oh, hey DA, how much longer till the first Blood and Redemption book is ready?" That was kind of a back-burnered project that's kind of been moved up to mid-burner. So as soon as I get Dark Frontiers First Hunt out, it's going to become one of the primary 2 projects that I'll be working. I'm going to be doing that, and I've got one of the project that I haven't announced yet that are going to be ones that I work primarily. I've got to get that short story done for Cam. That's that Apex Predator Lily Moon story. I need to get that done. But look for the first book of the Blood and Redemption series probably in the next couple of months. I'm hoping I'm 30,000 words into it, so it's not like it's going to take a lot to finish it. It's more than halfway, close to halfway done. Dark Frontiers First Hunt, a little heavier than some of the books. Right now, it's just over 80,000 words, which is 10,000 more than most of them. This is a heavy book. A lot of stuff happens. A lot of stuff that's going to affect other series. So this book series, as it continues, is going to have a huge impact on the rest of the series. Two Thinking says, "Will Steve Lilly ever meet Jay Matoska?" Probably going to happen in Lily Moon. Yeah, it's probably going to happen in Lily Moon. He's already met Gideon. D says, "Most dangerous job in the world, Bigfoot hunter. Someone has to die." Good point.
But that being said, not everybody that dies is always dead completely.
There is that. Not everybody. Most of them, but not everybody. Qbot says, "Odin's Call was our first book, and wow, we were hooked. We now have read 2 more and ready to start the 4th. Never a boring moment in your books." Thank you very much. I have a theory on my writing style. Years ago, when I was when I was a kid growing up on the farm, I was a voracious reader. I read everything I could get my hands on. And I remember reading old Mickey Spillane hard-boiled detective novels, and I enjoyed them. They were a lot of fun. They were just fun little reads, And I read an article in a magazine that where they'd interviewed Mickey Spillane, and they asked him, they said, "When you're writing a book and the plot kind of slows down and you're kind of up against a wall and don't know where to go, what do you do?" And he kind of laughed, and he says, "Well, that's easy." He says, if the plot slows down and I'm trying to figure out what to do next, I just have 2 goons kick in the front door and have them beat up the main character." And I took that to heart as a young man wanting to be a writer. I listened to that advice because I thought it was fantastic. So now if I reach a point where I don't know what to do next and I'm kind of trying to transition to the next scene, I just start a fight. And it's worked out pretty good so far.
Yep.
See if I missed any questions. Brother, we're at 2 hours and 19 minutes, man. We can probably start the Ozarks good night process. You want to
Yep.
tell us a little bit about what's really out there?
Uh, you mean DAX Machina Light? uh, yeah, what's really out there? Norm, Johnny, and I just kind of we really talk about a lot of the same stuff we talk about here. Just a shorter format. We record it. It's pre-recorded. Been kind of in a lull right now because we got some stuff going on. Those of you who've been here a while know my daughter and her boyfriend help us out a lot with that, and they're in the process of moving. Well, they've got everything pretty much. She came back today, and I helped her move her bed and everything. So they pretty much got everything sorted out. So we've been kind of hanging in that limbo till they get set up in their new house. Because Taylor does the artwork for the shows, and Tyler does all the editing and recording for us. And then, of course, I've got soccer season going on. Norm, I think, got moved to a new shift, so he was kind of trying to figure stuff out. And Johnny, pretty much, he lives on a small farm himself, so sometimes he's got we all got life that happens. So we've been kind of in a lull. We hadn't put any new stuff out there. Our last episode that we put out was about the movie monsters. But just we look at these things and just try to look at it from an evidentiary standpoint of what can we eliminate, what can we debunk. We're not trying to say anything is real or not real. We're just Occam's razor. Where does the evidence take us? And then there are some things that we get into that you just can't explain, and we just talk about it. It's kind of like the same thing we do here. We pick a subject and we sit and talk about it for 30 to 45 minutes. You can find us on YouTube, What's Really Out There, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Spotify, where most of the places you get your podcast from. We're not on Apple iTunes or anything like that because they're really complicated in what they want you to fill out to qualify for them. So we're not on that, but we're on iTunes. We're on, we're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, some of those smaller platforms. Really, the YouTube channel is probably about the best place because you can go to the YouTube channel and you can get in touch with us directly through that, or you can get in touch with us at the email what's really out there 2022@gmail.com. Love to have the support on the YouTube page. We've got a lot of subscribers, but a lot of the videos are only at like 20 and 30 and some of them 50 views. So that the views are kind of low on some of the videos, but I think they're pretty good videos for what we do.
I think you guys do a good job. I love your videos. And I had to go find the list of commands. Sorry, that's what I was doing. I put up your the link to your YouTube and your Spotify.
Yeah, Toom usually handles that, but he's not here tonight for family issues. But he normally throws all that stuff out there, so I don't usually have to worry about it. But it is what it is. Shy said he was. Shy, Saturday mornings, I used to, if there was a Godzilla movie on or any kind of creature feature.
I love old Godzilla films.
But Godzilla was probably my favorite thing to watch. So, yeah, I've probably seen every Godzilla movie that's ever been made at least 15 to 20 times or more. Used to have like probably 20 or 30 of them. On VHS, which I honestly probably still have them somewhere here in the house. Just don't know where they're at the moment. I was big in the Heisei era, the very first one, until they kind of started getting kind of goofy, and then of course Showa went back and made him a little bit scarier and meaner, which I liked. But yeah, Godzilla movies were what kept me going when I was a kid.
Ryan from Monster Radio is big into the kaiju Godzilla movies and stuff.
I live for my Saturday morning, early Saturday afternoon Godzilla movies. And if they had a marathon on, that's where I was at. I even had one of the I guess it was about 2 feet tall. Do you remember that, DA? The big Godzilla thing where he had a little thing on the back of his neck. You pushed it down, the tongue with the red flames on it, and you pushed a button on his wrist, and it shot his hand off, which never saw that in the movie, but
why was that on there?
Yep, but and it was
just a part for you to lose.
Yeah, and he had some kind of big robot that you could buy that he could fight too. And I had that, but the only robot that was ever in the movies other than Mechagodzilla was Jet Jaguar, and that thing didn't look like any of those. So I don't know who that was, but I had them. Yes, the Godzilla cartoon with Godzuki.
I remember that one. Saturday morning cartoon. I remember that one. Watch that one all the time.
Yep. The Calico was the name of the ship that they all sailed around on.
Mm-hmm.
That's some deep dive on some Godzilla cartoon knowledge right there.
That sure is. I'm trying to see if there's anything else I needed to put up. No, Meg Mills says, you definitely thanks to all the moderators. Appreciate you guys so much.
Good job tonight, guys.
Folks, we this was kind of a deep dive on those Bigfoot attacks going back to 1829. And it's amazing the similarities between the Bigfoot attack in 1819 with the Moss Mountain Massacre. Just an absolutely fantastic little story about Bigfoot that matches a lot of details and the characteristics of stories that came years later that probably had no knowledge whatsoever of what happened in 1829. I believe it was a real attack. I don't think this is just folklore. Not only did it make newspapers of the day, but it made a lasting impression, and the descriptions and the details match so many other things that happened. So, and when we started talking about the stride, Robbie was kind of breaking that down for us. I think, me personally, looking back at this, I believe this actually happened.
Yep. For it to be fake, there's just, for that time and that era, it's like people that have broke down the Patterson Gimlin footage and said, there's no way with the technology that was available at that time for them to hoax that movie. Well, it's the same thing. With the technology that was available at that time, there was no way people could have hoaxed that, in my opinion.
Right. And even if they, had been somebody from modern times who made the story up and tried to hoax it that way, it appeared in newspaper stories in 1829. So it's not like a made-up story from today that they just claimed happened in 1829. We have a physical bit of evidence that connects that this story really did happen in 1829. So the odds of this story being a complete fabrication or a hoax, very, very low. I truly believe they ran into something very big and very dangerous in the swamps on the Florida-Georgia line. And this is just another one of those stories from history that I think shines a light on the fact that people have known about these things for far longer than anybody called them Bigfoot or Yowie or whatever name you want to call it. All the Native Americans all had names for these things dating back generations before any European folks set foot on this continent. It's out there. I firmly believe it's out there, and I think it's going to be, the people that are putting themselves out there, that are going out and trying to find evidence, that are looking at this with an open mind, and not just going, oh no, there's no way this thing exists. There are far too many credible sightings, and when you look back in history, there are a lot of these amazing sightings that have probably been long forgotten, and God knows how many we don't even know about because Some of these newspapers may have never been archived. I think the more we dig and the more we look into archives, the more we're going to find historical accounts like this that help tie us to cryptids being, commonplace, more knowledge of them dating back further than we ever expected, like Werewolf Springs, for example, or the Moss Mountain Massacre. These have been happening for a long time. It's not just, since 1967 when the Patterson-Gimlin footage was filmed. It wasn't since 57. I think it was 1957 when Jerry Cruz found those huge tracks and cast them, and the local newspaper coined the term Bigfoot.
Bigfoot.
Long before that term was ever known, long before anybody ever heard of Bigfoot or Dogman, there were these stories. There was your Moss Mountain Massacres. There was this one from this swamp in 1829. There were lots of stories. The Ape Canyon incident. These things all happened long before anybody knew a name for these things. Yet stories still abound. So I think history has already shown us they're there. It's just a matter of getting science to admit it. John Wayne Gates says, DA, did the idiots send the PJs in with M4s after being told by Sergeant Bannon that their weapons were not any effect on Bigfoot? I don't think that would be a safe assumption. But in the beginning of Codename Wild Hunt, they were just looking to recover a downed drone. They had no idea there were Bigfoot there.
Did you say you hit a tree?
Yeah. No, we were hit by a tree. With the wind says that creature in question, great grandkids are still running around the Okie, just waiting on you to come say howdy. If we can get moved down there, we're looking at houses, looking to see if we can either put a bid on or find one that's reasonable enough to rent. We're looking in the greater area around Ocala. Me personally, Ocala is very attractive because it's like a couple hours from literally anything in the state or less. Plus, it's not in the floodplain when you get close to the coasts. It's 1/5 the size of the area I live in, and the crime rate around here is horrible. So Ocala is very attractive for a lot of reasons, and it would put me very close, within a couple hours of that Florida-Georgia line. And of course, we got Rip Rains over here, who's going to come down and take him to the train station if they get out of hand.
Right.
So I want to get down in that area so the group of us can start getting together and going out, not just to film documentaries, but just to do our own research. There's so many things that I think are going to come to light, and without giving anything away, Robbie's kind of onto something right at the moment that I hope pans out, that really does a lot to corroborate a lot of our theories, as well as the footage that MK Davis showed us where the black Bigfoot stopped in front of the tree and just disappeared, and you don't see it again until it moves. Some of the theories that we've put forth, I think, are going to hit a lot closer to home once certain things start coming to light. And that's also stuff we're planning to do with our documentary. Again, we're not saying the woo is impossible. We're not saying that anybody that's had a woo experience is lying. We're not saying any of that. What we're doing is, since most of us are cops, most of us have been, or have been in the law enforcement field, we're looking for the physical evidence. We're looking for the logical things that explain why these happen, because there's got to be one. That's the whole point of our documentary. That's the whole point of our research, is to look for these things that are to explain the unexplainable. That's our whole goal, to explain the unexplainable, and I think that's the best way I can put it. But look for some really interesting stuff coming from my channel and Robbie's. DA Ex Machina and DA Ex Machina Light, if you as you were.
He finally said it.
Look for a lot of stuff coming in the very near future that corroborates a lot of what we've been talking about over the last year. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I had a ball. I'd toyed with the idea of canceling the show tonight because my back is hurt so bad, but I grabbed a glass of water and a handful of ibuprofen about 30 minutes before the show started, and was able to get through it with only a minimal of wiggling around in the chair and groaning. Hopefully, my noise filter filtered out some of the groans. But yeah, as this procedure that I had continues to improve, they said they said it'd be 2 to 6 weeks before I noticed full improvement. I'm a week and a half in, and while I still have a considerable amount of back pain, I am already noticing more mobility. And as this continues to improve, and if it does what they say it's going to do, I'm going to be back out in the woods in force. So yeah, look for us filming those documentaries. Look for us getting back out on the trail, because I've had to kind of put that on the sideline here lately because my back got worse for a while. I was just reading this comment from Camo Dad. Thank you guys for spending the evening with us. Check out some of these older stories, and if there are stories from your area, if there are stories like this one that comes from the Florida-Georgia line, if you know stories that have floated around your neck of the woods for generations that just nobody seems to know about, we would love to hear about it. You can contact us. I'll put the email up right there, and I will throw the contact up again in the chat. You can reach us at daroberts@daroberts.net, or if you want to send us a postcard, or if you don't like using email, which I know a lot of folks don't, my PO box is right there. You can reach me at daroberts@daroberts.net, or at PO Box 4614, Springfield, Missouri 65808-4614. And we would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear about those stories, because these little local stories, these little local legends that haven't really made it into the mainstream, are going to be those little tidbits that tie this all together. Like I said, with the stories books I write, those little details are what builds the foundation for the bigger story. And it's the same thing with cryptids. Those little bits of information are going to give us those habits that tells the bigger picture.
Toshi asked if we've done anything from Pennsylvania. I think some of the when we used to do the reading the emails from people.
There were quite a few stories from Pennsylvania. Yeah. I have to go back through some of the archives now that we've left the NADP. Since I'm not part of the NADP anymore, I don't have access to their archives anymore. But I've got my own archives, so I need to go back and look for some of the stories from Pennsylvania. That's something we need to do here again. We need to do some more encounter shows. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'll set up a list of encounters.
People like those. Of course, I think people just like me getting the War and Peace versions of it.
Oh, you always manage the luck of the draw. You get the one that's 8 pages long
that I'm trying to read on my phone. Well, it's like,
and as Doc would say, you can barely read anyway.
Exactly. And I've never seen Rip have to wear glasses, but it is what it is.
But like you're saying, folks, look for a lot more very soon interesting content coming.
Doc might say I can't read, but at least I can reach stuff off the top shelf without a stool. Love you, Doc, if you're listening.
Hopefully Doc's listening. And hopefully Doc will be feeling better on Saturday. We'd love to have him back with us. He's he dealt with some bad weather and came home with a bad sinus infection. So he's probably self-medicated with some bullet, and is probably taking a snooze. Yeah, he's probably self-medicated and taking a snooze by now. But folks, I hope you guys will join us again on Saturday. I haven't posted the show yet, but I'll try to get that up tonight or tomorrow if I can. Check out my books over at daroberts.net. And if you were interested in becoming part of the Patreon community, check it out at patreon.com/DARobertsAuthor, as I sure would appreciate it. And it helps fuel the DA verse, and you'll be able to help decide which projects come next. There's a list over there. It's about want to say 51 or 52 books that I've got in the works. And you guys can help me decide which ones come next. In addition, getting previews of the writing before it even comes out. Like I said, there's a number of short stories that are already up and over there that aren't in print anywhere else other than the Patreon. So if you join the Patreon, you can scroll back through and find a lot of stories to read, including the first 2 chapters of Dark Frontier's First Hunt. The first couple are on there, so I hope you guys will check that out. I hope you like them. But again, thank you guys for being with us. I've said it many times. I'll say it again. I will always say it. We don't have fans. We have friends. Really appreciate you guys spending your evening with us. We asked you guys to keep some folks in our prayers earlier, and again, just keep all of the folks we've mentioned in your prayers. There's some folks. Always remember, no matter how bad you think you have it, there's folks out there that got it worse. So definitely keep those folks in your prayers, and remember, the world sucks right now, and the only way we're going to get through it is together. So hopefully we will see you guys on Saturday night. We'll have another show, and hopefully you'll have more entertainment than just our 2 ugly mugs. The black cowboy hat crowd. But we appreciate you guys spending time with us, and that's what I've said. One of my phrases is that stories are journeys that we take together, and I want to thank each and every one of you for taking this journey with us. So, if you've heard any stories that happen in your area, just shoot us an email. We would love to hear about them, and hopefully we'll hear from you guys soon, and we will continue to bring you as much information as we possibly can, and we will see you guys on Saturday night. So hopefully you guys will have a great week, and we'll see you this weekend. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you for joining us. Catch us again Wednesdays and Saturdays on DAX Machina. A special thanks to all our channel members and Patreon supporters. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe.